In the infinite quiet of the cosmos, every star is a whisper and every planet a secret. The Milky Way is a forest of light. Billions of suns tangled in invisible webs of gravity. Yet, behind this beauty lies a silence more profound than any wilderness on Earth. We have searched, listened, and called out for decades, and the universe has not answered. But what if this silence is not emptiness? What if it is fear? What if every civilization hides, holding its breath in the dark? If every mind in the cosmos is a hunter and every flicker of radio light a giveaway of position, then calling out could mean extinction. If you find yourself drawn to stories where science meets quiet wonder, consider subscribing and joining us as we move deeper into this dark forest. Let's begin. For more than half a century, humanity has turned its attention toward the sky, quietly expecting that we might not be alone. Vast dishes from projects like SETI continue to sweep across the stars, rotating with patient precision. Yet what returns to us is only a vast ocean of static. No melodies, no deliberate patterns, no voices carried across the dark. Only a silence so complete that it begins to feel almost deliberate. Night after night, enormous metal structures lean toward infinity, their curved surfaces scattered across deserts and high mountain plateaus, listening carefully to the oldest signals the universe has to offer. Within that endless background, there is a kind of quiet music, the soft vibration of hydrogen atoms, the steady rhythm of distant quasars, and the faint, persistent whisper of cosmic background radiation, a lingering trace from the universe's earliest moments. Scientists sift through this immense field of noise, searching for something that does not belong, a subtle irregularity, a pattern shaped not by nature, but by thought itself, a signal that might gently say, "We are here as well." And yet, the pattern never appears. The static remains unchanged. The universe continues in this way, silent, indifferent, and seemingly without end. This was not what we once expected. In the early days of radio astronomy, there was a quiet confidence that discovery was close. The Drake equation suggested that the galaxy could be filled with countless civilizations, each one alive with awareness, each one potentially reaching outward just as we were. It seemed reasonable to believe that somewhere, someone would be transmitting, that within a short span of years, we might detect a repeating pulse, a mathematical structure, or a beacon designed to be found. But the years became decades. Instruments grew larger, receivers more refined, computers more capable. Still, nothing changed. The sky offered no reply. Some have come to describe this as the Great Silence, while others refer to it as something more unsettling. An empty stillness that feels almost deliberate. It is not simply the lack of sound, but the presence of uncertainty, a kind of quiet that makes you wonder whether you are truly alone, or simply unheard, or perhaps quietly observed. It is the kind of silence that suggests not absence, but restraint, as though the universe itself is choosing not to speak. Inside observatories, this silence takes on a physical quality. Through headphones, it becomes a low, steady hiss, broken only occasionally by the distant pulse of a neutron star. Those who spend enough time listening begin to notice something unsettling about it. The uniformity feels too precise, too consistent to be dismissed easily. It carries a strange completeness, as if nothing has been left out. And yet, it is easy to overlook a simple truth. While we listen, we have also been speaking. For more than a century, Earth has been sending signals outward, radio waves, broadcasts, radar echoes, all expanding into space at the speed of light. Together, they form a growing sphere of human activity, a quiet but unmistakable signature. To any observer within roughly 100 light-years, our planet would appear as a faint source of artificial sound, subtle, but clearly distinct from natural noise. Still, no answer returns. Perhaps no one is there to hear us. Perhaps the distances are too great, or civilizations too rare, or their lifespans too brief to overlap with ours. Or perhaps the explanation is more deliberate. It may be that others do receive these signals, examine them, and then choose silence. Because in a universe where survival could depend on remaining unseen, responding might carry its own risk. This quiet is more than a scientific question. It begins to feel like something deeper, almost philosophical. It asks us to consider whether intelligence is both a remarkable gift and a fragile condition. Whether awareness itself is only a brief moment, flickering before it fades unnoticed. As our instruments become more sensitive, and as observatories reach farther into space, we may eventually begin to understand the nature of this silence. But for now, we continue to listen. We wait without certainty, and in that waiting, humanity becomes part of the quiet it is trying to understand. A young civilization standing at the threshold of something vast, sending out faint signals into the dark, hoping that somewhere, something might be listening in return. If the universe is as old and expansive as we believe, and if life arises wherever conditions allow, then a question begins to emerge, simple in form, yet deeply unsettling in its implications. Where is everyone? This question, first raised by Enrico Fermi during a casual conversation in the mid-20th century, remains one of the most enduring puzzles in science. It was not framed as a grand theory, but as a simple observation, spoken almost in passing. Surrounded by colleagues discussing the possibility of interstellar travel and unidentified objects, Fermi paused and asked a question that would echo far beyond that moment, a question that still lingers, unanswered, in the silence above us. If there are billions of stars that formed long before our own sun, then a quiet question begins to take shape. Why has no one come here? By every reasonable expectation. The galaxy should be filled with life, civilizations rising and spreading across the stars. The Milky Way is more than 13 billion years old, an immense span of time, more than enough for intelligent species to emerge, grow, and reach far beyond their home worlds again and again. Even if just one civilization had discovered how to travel between stars, it could, in theory, expand across the entire galaxy in only a few million years, a brief moment when compared to cosmic history. And yet, when we look outward, there is nothing. No signals that clearly stand apart from nature. No probes drifting through our system. No visitors crossing the vast dark. This contrast between what seems statistically likely and what we actually observe forms the core of what we now call the Fermi paradox. It is not only a scientific problem, but also something more reflective. It mirrors our own expectations, our assumptions about life and intelligence. Over time, many explanations have been considered. Some suggest that life itself is incredibly rare, perhaps an event so unlikely that it has happened only once. Others propose that civilizations tend to end themselves before reaching the stars, undone by conflict, by their own technologies, or by a gradual loss of purpose. There is also the idea of the Great Filter, a hidden threshold that very few species manage to cross. It could lie in our past, or somewhere ahead. Beyond this, more unusual possibilities emerge. It may be that advanced civilizations are common, but we simply do not recognize them. Their methods could be far beyond our current understanding, or so subtle that they blend seamlessly into natural cosmic processes. Some have even imagined that we exist within a kind of cosmic preserve, sometimes called the zoo hypothesis, where humanity is observed from a distance but never approached. allowed to develop without interference. Yet beneath all these ideas, there is a quieter possibility. Perhaps the silence itself is not just a puzzle, but something closer to a warning. In a universe where caution might determine survival, it is possible that the first civilization to reveal its presence also becomes the first to disappear. This is why Fermi's question continues to resonate. It gently reminds us of both our smallness and our fragility. It suggests that we may not be among the first to explore the galaxy, but rather among those who have simply endured long enough to ask the question, that somewhere, scattered across the stars, there may already be the remnants of those who spoke too early. With each new exoplanet we discover, the mystery deepens. Every distant world, faintly illuminated under an unfamiliar sun, could hold the traces of a civilization that once looked upward and wondered the same thing. Where is everyone? Perhaps they are gone. Perhaps they have chosen to remain hidden. Or perhaps they are watching, quietly, waiting for us to reach the same understanding they once did, that in a universe like this, the first sound you make may also be the last. There are, by many estimates, more planets than grains of sand on Earth. The Milky Way alone may contain around 1 trillion worlds. By probability alone, there should be countless civilizations, and yet, we see no clear sign of them. Something does not quite align. Each night, the sky above us glows with ancient light, every star a distant system, surrounded by planets moving in quiet, predictable paths. These worlds vary in ways that are almost difficult to imagine. Some are frozen giants, others are scorched landscapes, and many fall somewhere in between. Observations from instruments like the James Webb Space Telescope have already revealed atmospheres layered with clouds, hints of oceans reflecting distant light, and chemical signatures that suggest the basic ingredients for life are widespread. The universe does not appear empty. It appears full, rich with possibility. And yet, for all that abundance, it remains deeply silent. When we first began to grasp the scale of the cosmos, there was a sense of quiet optimism. If even a small fraction of stars hosted planets capable of supporting life, and if even a fraction of those worlds produced living systems, then the galaxy should still contain a vast number of civilizations. The numbers seem to lead naturally toward the expectation of company. By the quiet logic of probability, we should not be alone. The numbers themselves seem to suggest companionship. And yet, it is precisely this abundance that deepens the mystery. Across those countless worlds, there have been billions of years, and within that vast stretch of time, uncountable opportunities for life to emerge, adapt, and eventually look back toward the stars. Given enough time, even the rarest events begin to feel almost inevitable. Somewhere within that immense ocean of planets, it feels reasonable to expect that something else has developed the same quiet curiosity. And so the question remains, where are they? One possibility is that we have simply arrived too early, that the universe is still in its youth, and that life is only beginning to take hold. Another view suggests the opposite, that we may be late. Survivors in a cosmos that once held many civilizations that have already faded. There are also more subtle ideas. Perhaps advanced forms of life exist, but operate on scales of time or awareness that are beyond our perception. Much like a vast creature might ignore the smallest movements around it. Even so, the question continues to linger. With so many stars and so many possible worlds, should there not be clear signs of activity, signals crossing the void, structures built to harness the energy of entire stars, or at least some unmistakable trace of intelligence? Instead, what we encounter is a silence so deep it seems to echo back on itself. It is possible that the explanation is both simpler and more unsettling. Perhaps intelligent life does not endure for long. It may be that every civilization reaching a certain level of technology eventually encounters the same turning point, whether through conflict, environmental collapse, or the unintended consequences of its own creations. The very tools that allow a species to make itself known may also carry within them the seeds of its disappearance. The numbers suggest a crowded universe, yet our observations reveal only emptiness. Each newly discovered exoplanet, each world that could resemble our own, no longer brings reassurance. Instead, it intensifies the contradiction. Every potentially habitable planet becomes another reminder that life should be widespread. And if it is not, then something must be preventing it from lasting. We find ourselves on a living world, surrounded by what appears to be an ocean of silent ones. The possibilities are vast, but so are the risks. Somewhere within this immense abundance lies the reason the universe feels so still. It may not be that we are alone, but that every other voice has already fallen quiet. Between the first spark of life and the emergence of intelligence, something seems to interrupt the journey. The Great Filter is often described not as a barrier you can see, but as a quiet process of elimination. And we do not yet know where it lies, whether it is something we have already passed or something that still awaits us. If we imagine the history of the universe as a vast river flowing for nearly 14 billion years, then along its path there are countless branching currents, worlds where life could have formed. Yet for reasons we do not fully understand, most of those paths seem to fade before reaching the open ocean. The flow continues, but much of it remains silent. Somewhere along the long arc of evolution, many lines appear to end suddenly. Civilizations do not continue. They disappear before their signals can ever reach beyond their own skies. In this sense, the Great Filter becomes one of the most sobering explanations for the Fermi paradox. It suggests that while life itself may arise often, the transition to advanced spacefaring intelligence is extraordinarily rare, because something almost always prevents it from fully developing. That something could be an unavoidable step in the process, a narrow passage that very few ever cross. It may even lie in the distant past, in the unlikely transition from simple chemistry to living systems. If that is the case, then our own existence would represent an extraordinary exception, a rare instance where the process succeeded. But there is another possibility, one that is more difficult to ignore. The filter may not be behind us at all. It may still lie ahead. It may be that every civilization, once it reaches a certain level of capability, eventually encounters a moment where its own power becomes its greatest vulnerability. Nuclear conflict, engineered biological risks, uncontrolled artificial intelligence, or environmental collapse. These are not distant ideas, but possibilities already within our reach. The list of possibilities grows longer the more we consider it, and each one carries a quiet weight. It leads to a sobering reflection that the silence we observe among the stars may not be emptiness at all, but something closer to a vast memorial, a record of worlds that once held life, places where cities may have formed, where signals once traveled outward, now reduced to stillness, oceans that may have once moved under alien skies, now either frozen in place or long since evaporated, beneath horizons that will never see another dawn. What makes this idea more unsettling is how quietly it could unfold. The Great Filter does not arrive with warning. It does not announce itself or give notice. Instead, it may emerge gradually, as civilizations reach a delicate balance where intelligence brings power, and power introduces new forms of vulnerability. A single misstep, an uncontrolled technology, or a moment of irreversible decision could be enough to extinguish everything that came before. And yet, the simple fact that we are here, able to observe and question, may itself carry meaning. It could suggest that we have already passed through the most difficult stage. Perhaps the greatest challenge was the transition from simple life to complex organisms, or from instinctive behavior to conscious thought. It may be that awareness itself is one of the rarest developments in the universe, and that we have already crossed a threshold few others ever reach. Still, there is uncertainty. Each advancement we make, whether in energy, biology, or artificial intelligence, could guide us toward a more stable future, or lead us along the same path that ended countless others. If the filter lies in the past, then we may be among the fortunate few who endured. But if it lies ahead, then we may already be approaching it, step by step, without fully realizing it. In that sense, every achievement carries a quiet duality: progress on one side and risk on the other. The silence surrounding us may not be an absence, but something more deliberate, a distant echo of those who once reached too far, too quickly. As we look outward into the night sky, wondering what might exist beyond our reach, it is possible that we are also glimpsing a reflection of ourselves, civilizations that rose briefly, illuminated their worlds, and then disappeared into stillness. It is not difficult to imagine such a beginning. On a distant planet, under unfamiliar stars, a species lifts its gaze for the first time, not in fear, but in curiosity. It begins to recognize patterns, to shape tools, to harness energy, to transform its environment. In that moment, something new begins. The quiet emergence of thought. The earliest signs of progress are small: a flame, a rhythm, the first mechanical motion. But over time, that light grows stronger. Materials are refined, energy is directed, and entire cities begin to glow against the night. The darkness of a single world gives way to the presence of intelligence, to invention, to intention. Yet beyond that world, in the vastness of space, such light carries meaning beyond itself. It becomes a signal, a subtle declaration that something has begun to think. From within, it feels like achievement. From afar, it may appear as exposure. In a universe where remaining unseen might be the safest course. The emergence of visible intelligence could also mark the beginning of vulnerability. As that light grows, so does its reach. Every form of detectable energy, whether in radio waves, heat signatures, or changes in atmosphere, begins to extend outward. Information travels at the speed of light, carrying with it evidence of existence to any observer capable of noticing. The story of a civilization begins to spread long before it has the ability to control who might receive it. On Earth, this process began a little over a century ago. Since then, a sphere of electromagnetic signals has expanded steadily outward, now reaching nearly 200 light-years in every direction. Within that region, our planet would appear as a faint but distinct source of artificial activity, a small but noticeable anomaly against the natural background. To any distant observer, those early signals would form a kind of historical record. The first coded transmissions, early broadcasts, fragments of culture, conflict, and communication, all traveling outward together. It is a quiet and somewhat unsettling thought that somewhere these signals may already have been detected, that our presence may already be known. For civilizations older than ours, this pattern may be familiar. Each one, at some point, would have reached the same threshold, where discovery leads to visibility and curiosity introduces risk. The first steps toward knowledge also carry the possibility of being seen, and perhaps this is part of the reason the universe appears so still. It may be that every civilization that once shone brightly eventually came to the same realization, though perhaps too late, that its first light was not only a triumph, but also a signal best dimmed. Some may have learned to conceal themselves, surrounding their worlds with technologies designed to reduce their presence, to blend into the quiet background of the cosmos. Others may never have had that opportunity. Not every beginning leads to safety. The first emergence of thought may always carry a hidden cost. The moment a species becomes visible within the vast and uncertain expanse of the stars, and as our own presence grows more detectable, it is natural to wonder whether that visibility has already been noticed. The idea, explored by Liu Cixin, suggests that the universe may not be empty, but cautious, even predatory in its logic. In this view, every civilization exists within something like a dark and silent forest, aware that others may be out there, yet unwilling to reveal itself. If we imagine the cosmos in this way, each star becomes like a distant tree, and each planet a hidden branch, between them, unseen. Are countless observers, civilizations that have emerged, developed, and learned to move carefully within the dark. They do not announce themselves. They do not call out. They remain still, aware that even a single signal could reveal their location. In such a setting, there is no shared system of rules, no guarantee of cooperation, only the quiet imperative to survive. This is the central idea behind the dark forest theory. It proposes that the silence we observe is not due to absence, but to caution. In a universe where resources are limited and intentions cannot be known, every intelligent species may be forced to assume the most uncertain possibilities. In such a reality, any signal could be interpreted as a threat. Any visible presence could become a target. To communicate is to reveal where you are, and to reveal where you are is to accept a level of risk that may not be reversible. From this perspective, silence becomes a rational choice, not out of fear alone, but as a form of long-term strategy. If two civilizations exist within the same galaxy, separated by vast distances and unable to understand each other's intentions, each faces a difficult decision. They may remain quiet, preserving their safety, or attempt to reach out, knowing that doing so exposes them to something unknown. Without trust, and without the possibility of timely communication, the safest assumption may always lean toward caution. In this interpretation, the universe becomes something far more complex than it first appears. Not a quiet and empty space, but one filled with observers who have chosen restraint, each one listening, waiting, hoping not to be discovered. The stillness we perceive may not be emptiness at all, but the result of many civilizations following the same unspoken principle. To remain unseen is to endure. What makes this idea resonate is how closely it reflects patterns we already understand. Even on Earth, encounters between unfamiliar societies have rarely unfolded without tension. The unknown often brings uncertainty, and uncertainty can lead to defensive actions taken too soon. Scaled up across the vast distances of space, this pattern does not necessarily disappear. It may simply become more subtle and far more consequential. This could help explain why we do not observe clear signs of advanced engineering across the galaxy. No vast structures surrounding stars. No visible networks of interstellar travel. It may not be because such achievements are impossible, but because any civilization that became too visible did not remain so for long. Those that persisted may have done so by learning how to remain hidden, reducing their signals, blending into the background, becoming indistinguishable from the natural universe. And so, the quiet continues. Our instruments scan the sky, searching for even the smallest sign of activity, while at the same time, our own signals continue to move outward. Our transmissions, our exploration, our gradual expansion into space. All of it may already be marking our presence in ways we do not fully appreciate. We are not observing this vast forest from the outside. We are already within it, surrounded by distances we cannot cross, and possibilities we cannot yet confirm. The deeper question may no longer be whether others exist, but whether they have already noticed us, and simply chosen not to respond. In a universe like this, survival may follow a very simple principle. To remain quiet is to remain safe. To be visible is to accept uncertainty. And perhaps, like many forms of life we already know, the most enduring presence is not the one that calls out, but the one that learns to remain unseen. Space, for all its quiet beauty, may not be a place of safety, but something closer to a wilderness. An endless expanse where the same fundamental rules of survival still apply. Even across unimaginable distances, to remain silent is to remain hidden. To exist is to risk being seen. And in the vast cold between the stars, being seen may carry consequences we are only beginning to consider. The more carefully we study the universe, the more it becomes clear how fragile a civilization might be. It would not take much. A single object, small in size yet moving at a significant fraction of the speed of light, could carry enough energy to devastate an entire world without warning. A focused beam of energy, invisible and precise, could erase a biosphere before any response was possible. There would be no time for resistance, no opportunity to recover, only the sudden absence of what once existed. This is not a vision driven by hostility, but by logic. Within the framework of the dark forest theory, every civilization must begin with two simple assumptions: that life seeks to preserve itself, and that other forms of life may possess the capability to end it. From these assumptions, a difficult conclusion emerges. If two civilizations become aware of each other, the safest course may be to act first, before uncertainty becomes risk. Seen in this way, silence is no longer passive. It becomes a deliberate choice, a form of intelligence shaped over time. To remain undetected is to endure. It is possible that the most advanced civilizations are not the most visible, but the most careful. Their technologies may not be directed outward for discovery, but inward for concealment, reducing heat signatures, controlling emissions, ensuring that no unnecessary signal escapes into the surrounding dark. Our own search has often focused on brightness, on signals, on large-scale engineering that would stand out clearly against the natural background. But perhaps this expectation leads us away from what actually exists. If survival depends on remaining unnoticed, then the civilizations that persist would not reveal themselves through brilliance. They would be quiet, almost indistinguishable from the environments around them. When we imagine life beyond Earth, we often picture it as open and curious, ready to reach outward. Yet natural processes rarely reward openness without caution. Systems that assume safety where none is guaranteed tend not to endure. On our own planet, the same pattern appears again and again. In deep oceans, the brightest lights can serve as traps. Across open landscapes, the loudest signals draw attention. Survival often belongs to those who remain subtle, those who blend into their surroundings. If this principle extends beyond biology to entire civilizations, then the pattern may simply scale upward. The silence we observe would not be a lack of life, but a reflection of how life adapts to its environment. Not absence, but strategy. Over time, any civilization that continues to exist may come to understand this, whether through experience or through loss. It may learn that restraint is essential, that the greatest risk is not the darkness itself, but what may already exist within it. We look to the stars in search of others, hoping for signs of companionship. But if this perspective holds true, then each distant light may represent not a greeting, but a caution. Somewhere, perhaps far beyond our current reach, there may be observers who have already reached this understanding, watching, waiting, calculating carefully, choosing silence not out of indifference, but out of necessity. And in that silence, there may be a quiet truth. In a universe where uncertainty cannot be resolved, the safest signal may be none at all. Every civilization, eventually, may arrive at the same realization that the intentions of others can never be fully known, and in a reality without certainty, two paths remain: to remain silent, or to act before being acted upon. This is the quiet equation that may shape the fate of intelligence itself. It begins, as it always does, with curiosity, with the desire to understand what lies beyond the next horizon, the next star, the next unknown. But the further a civilization extends its awareness into the cosmos, the more it may begin to encounter a difficult realization. Intelligence is not only rare, it may also be inherently dangerous. Even if life itself arises often, the act of communication carries risk. Across distances measured in light years, misunderstanding is not just possible, it becomes unavoidable. There can be no gradual exchange, no shared language built over time through conversation. Every signal sent into the dark requires years or centuries to arrive. Any reply would return long after the original context has changed. The distance between civilizations is not only measured in space, but in time. And within that delay, uncertainty grows. If we imagine two distant civilizations separated by 1,000 light years, the situation becomes clearer. One detects a signal from the other, a structured pattern that cannot be explained by natural processes. It confirms that something exists beyond their world, but what remains unknown is intent. Are they peaceful explorers, distant observers, or something more dangerous? There is no reliable way to determine this. Within a universe governed by physical limits, where actions cannot be undone and information travels slowly, uncertainty tends to shape decisions. In such a situation, caution may transform into logic. The safest choice may not be to respond, but to remain silent. To reveal one's presence is to accept a risk without any guarantee of outcome. And reliance on hope alone is not a stable strategy for survival. This reasoning is not limited to abstract theory. It reflects patterns already present in nature. Even the simplest forms of life respond to uncertainty with caution. A small movement in the environment may signal opportunity or danger. Those that assumed safety without verification did not persist. Over time, this response becomes deeply embedded, a fundamental mechanism of survival. When extended to the scale of entire civilizations, this instinct becomes something more structured. It becomes policy. The quiet we observe among the stars may not be the result of absence, but of shared caution. Not because no one is there, but because each one has reached the same conclusion. Every civilization, regardless of its knowledge or intentions, may eventually face a similar decision. To act first, accepting the consequences, or to wait, accepting the uncertainty. Neither path is without risk. One carries the possibility of unnecessary harm, the other the possibility of being unprepared. Some civilizations, if they exist, may have chosen isolation. They may have turned inward, sustaining themselves within controlled environments, minimizing any detectable trace. Others may have taken a more decisive approach, removing potential threats before they could grow. Different strategies, but leading toward a similar outcome. Those who reveal themselves do not remain visible for long, while those who remain cautious may continue unnoticed. It is often assumed that greater intelligence leads naturally to greater compassion, that with advancement comes a broader sense of understanding, yet intelligence does not eliminate fear. It refines it. It allows it to be measured, anticipated, and incorporated into decision-making. And within the vast, quiet expanse of space, even the most thoughtful intentions may ultimately yield to the simple requirement to endure. Perhaps this is the deeper tragedy of the universe. Not that life is rare, but that fear may be something shared by all who become aware. It could be a common thread linking every form of intelligence, whether human or otherwise, every mind that has ever looked into the darkness and wondered what might be looking back. And so, we remain quiet. We listen. We wait, hoping that the silence we encounter is not the result of fear's aftermath, but something closer to a fragile balance. At the beginning of the 20th century, a moment quietly changed everything. In 1901, Guglielmo Marconi transmitted the first radio signal across the Atlantic. It was a small event, just a brief spark of energy crossing the air. But it marked the moment when humanity learned to extend its voice beyond immediate sight. From that point forward, the scale of our world began to shift. Distances seemed smaller, and for the first time, our presence began to leave a detectable trace beyond the surface of our planet. Within only a few decades, Earth had become something new, not just a place where signals were sent, but a continuous source of them. Radio broadcasts, radar pulses, television transmissions, and satellite communications all began to spread outward, moving at the speed of light into the surrounding cosmos. Together, these signals form what is often described as a radio bubble, an expanding sphere of human activity now reaching nearly 200 light-years in every direction. It continues to grow, moving silently through space, passing by nearby stars. To any distant observer within that range, Earth would not appear entirely natural. It would carry a faint but structured pattern, a steady rhythm of information that does not arise from ordinary cosmic processes. Within this invisible sphere exists a kind of record. If a receiver were sensitive enough, it might capture fragments of our past, echoes of early broadcasts, voices carried across time, music, announcements, and moments that once defined entire generations. These signals move outward, unchanged, carrying with them a history that continues long after the moment itself has passed. And yet, there is a quiet contradiction within this. While we have been sending these signals freely, almost without reflection, we have no clear understanding of who or what might be capable of receiving them. What began as a technological achievement has, in some sense, become an unintended signal, a distant light that cannot easily be turned off. In earlier years, our transmissions spread in all directions, broad and inefficient, reaching as far as they could without focus. Over time, this has begun to change. Modern communication has become more refined, more directed, often aimed towards satellites rather than deep space. Without fully intending to, we have begun to reduce our visibility. Even so, the earliest signals remain. They continue outward, unchanged, like messages set adrift across a vast ocean. If they are ever received, they will not only reveal that we existed, but also when we existed, because each signal carries a moment from the past. To an observer located 100 light-years away, Earth would still appear in an earlier stage of its development, its inhabitants only beginning to experiment with flight, unaware of the technological changes that would follow. It is a quiet and humbling thought that long before we fully understood the implications, we had already begun to announce ourselves to the universe. It is almost as if we are children calling out into a vast cavern, unaware of how deep the darkness truly is, or what might be listening from within it. One day, our signals may reach a distant world where another form of intelligence listens quietly, considering the choice we have already made, the choice to speak, to reveal ourselves, and perhaps, beneath an unfamiliar sky, they may ask the same question we now find ourselves asking. In a universe where sound may carry consequence, who is willing to make the first move? Our planet has already done so. The sphere of radio signals surrounding Earth has expanded to nearly 200 light-years, forming an invisible boundary that continues to move outward. Any civilization within that range could already be aware of us. It is like a growing shell, a continuous wave of human presence, carrying our history, our ideas, and our curiosity into the unknown. Every piece of information we have ever transmitted travels within this expanding boundary. Music, conversations, scientific data, commands sent to spacecraft, all of it moves outward at the speed of light. From our perspective, the sky remains quiet. But to an observer within that sphere, Earth may already appear unusual. A planet that emits a structured, intentional signal against the randomness of space. Within this expanding region lie thousands of stars, many of which are known to host planetary systems. Some of these worlds may exist within conditions suitable for life, where liquid water could be present. By probability alone, it is possible that dozens, or even hundreds of these planets may have already detected the patterns within our transmissions and recognized them as artificial. Our location, in that case, would no longer be unknown. To such observers, Earth might simply be categorized as active, a source of consistent and non-natural signals. And with each passing year, the boundary grows larger, moving outward steadily, adding new regions of space to its reach. The outer edges carry our earliest transmissions, faint and fragmented. Early signals that reflect a very different stage of our development. Closer to the center of this expanding sphere are more recent layers, filled with increasingly complex forms of communication. Each layer represents a moment in time, a snapshot of who we were at that point. Together, they form a continuous record, not only of our existence, but of our behavior, our priorities, and our way of thinking. Anyone capable of interpreting these signals would not only know that we are here, but would begin to understand what we are like. The structure of our languages, the patterns of our technology, the nature of our culture, all of it is embedded within those waves. Our entire civilization, in a sense, has been translated into a faint electromagnetic presence. As this sphere continues to expand, so too does the uncertainty that comes with it. Once another civilization becomes aware of you, the outcome is no longer entirely within your control. They may choose to observe from a distance. They may attempt communication, or they may interpret your existence as something that requires caution. And the most difficult part is that we would not know which path they chose. Our signals travel far beyond our ability to follow them. They move ahead of us, carrying information about who we were, without any way for us to retract or reshape what has already been sent. In that sense, our position has already been revealed, and there is no clear way to undo it. And yet, there is something quietly meaningful in this as well. This expanding sphere of sound is the first trace humanity has left beyond its own world. A fragile extension of our curiosity, reaching outward long before we have physically traveled those distances. While we remain bound to our solar system, our presence has already extended across vast regions of space. It is possible that, even now, the earliest fragments of our transmissions are passing over distant worlds, barely distinguishable from background noise, carrying with them faint echoes of our voices, our music, and our history. Perhaps they will pass unnoticed, or perhaps somewhere far away, an observer has already paused, recognizing something within that signal and begun to listen more closely. While we continue to search the sky, building instruments and refining our methods, it is worth considering that the silence we hear may not be a lack of response, but a different perspective. That while we are listening for others, others may already be listening to us. In some of the most remote regions of our planet, where the air grows thin and the landscape feels almost untouched, large instruments continue their quiet work. Enormous radio dishes rise from deserts and distant plains, their curved surfaces angled carefully toward the sky. In places like the Atacama Desert, across parts of Australia, at the site of the former Arecibo Observatory, and at the vast, FAST telescope, these structures stand quietly, almost like observers themselves, waiting with patience for something to arrive. Each instrument is designed to detect the faintest variations, subtle disturbances within the radio spectrum that might indicate something more than natural processes. They sift continuously through an immense background of cosmic noise, searching for patterns that repeat, rhythms that persist, signals that suggest intention. Data flows endlessly into powerful systems, scanning across vast ranges of frequencies, all in the hope of capturing a single moment, a single indication that we are not alone. Those who work with these instruments often describe the silence in unusual ways, not as emptiness, but as something with presence. There are nights when the steady background noise seems to carry weight, as though the absence itself has meaning. For more than half a century, these systems have listened carefully, yet no clear response has ever returned. As time passes, the question begins to shift. Instead of asking why we have not heard anything, another possibility emerges. What if we are not simply the ones listening? What if we are also the ones being heard? While we direct our instruments outward, sending carefully constructed messages into space, our planet continues to emit signals in every direction. Earth is not quiet. It produces a continuous flow of electromagnetic activity, a steady pulse that extends far beyond our atmosphere. From a distant perspective, our world may not appear as a silent observer, but as a source, a place where structured signals emerge, carrying patterns that stand apart from natural cosmic processes. In that sense, we may not only be searching for others, but also revealing ourselves in ways we cannot easily control. It is a subtle reversal. We often think of ourselves as explorers, reaching outward into the unknown. Yet it is possible that we are also being observed, that the faint signature of our activity has already been detected elsewhere. Our transmissions, though weak across vast distances, may still carry enough structure to be recognized. If that is the case, then somewhere beyond our current reach, there may already be observers who have identified our presence. They may be studying these signals, mapping their patterns, learning about our world from afar, and like us, they may have reached a similar conclusion: to remain silent, to observe without responding. In such a scenario, the universe would not be filled with voices, but with listeners. Countless worlds, each equipped with their own instruments, each searching, each waiting, and each learning that speaking may carry risk. The silence we perceive would not be the absence of communication, but a form of it, a shared understanding. Unspoken, but widely followed. On a galactic scale, silence may function as a kind of agreement, not written or enforced, but understood. A recognition that remaining quiet increases the chance of survival, that revealing oneself may not lead to connection, but to uncertainty. And so, the search continues. Telescopes keep scanning the sky, systems keep processing signals, and humanity continues to listen, waiting for something that may never arrive. Not necessarily because no one is there, but because those who are there may have already learned to remain quiet in a universe where even a small signal can carry unintended consequences. One possibility is more subtle, and perhaps more unsettling. It suggests that humanity may not be ignored at all, but quietly observed. Much like a species within a protected environment, not contacted, not disturbed, either for our safety or for the safety of others. This idea, often referred to as the zoo hypothesis, proposes that we are not alone, but intentionally left in isolation. In this view, advanced civilizations may already be aware of us, choosing not to interfere. They may observe from a distance, much as we study fragile ecosystems, careful not to influence what unfolds. The concept, first suggested by John Ball in the 1970s, imagines the universe as something like a vast preserve, where intelligent life exists widely, but direct contact is restricted. Perhaps there are shared principles guiding such restraint, an unspoken agreement to allow emerging civilizations to develop on their own. From that perspective, Earth might appear as a young and evolving world, still learning how to manage its own capabilities. If this is the case, then our isolation is not accidental, but chosen. The silence we interpret as emptiness could instead be a form of observation. Every signal we send, every probe we launch, may be received and noted, even if no reply is given. It is possible that observers exist beyond our awareness, or perhaps even closer than we expect, quietly monitoring our progress in ways we cannot detect. It is a difficult thought to consider that each transmission we produce, every step we take outward, could be recorded and studied. Moments that we see as milestones, the development of powerful technologies, or the first steps beyond our planet, might be viewed from afar as indicators of growth, and yet no response follows. Not out of indifference, but perhaps out of intention. If such observers exist, their silence may reflect caution. They may be waiting, not only to understand us, but to see whether we can navigate the challenges that come with our own advancement, whether we can move beyond the risks that have ended other civilizations before they could endure, or perhaps they hesitate because they recognize how transformative contact would be. To reveal their presence would alter everything: our understanding of ourselves, our place in the universe, the structures of belief and identity that define our societies. All would shift at once. It is not clear that such a change would be easy to absorb. It might reshape civilization in ways we cannot fully anticipate. So they remain silent, and we continue to look outward, assuming we are alone. But if this perspective is correct, then the galaxy may not be a place of hidden danger, but something more carefully balanced. A quiet environment where developing species are allowed to grow without interference. It is possible that there are principles at work far older than our own history, not written as formal agreements, but understood through experience, and perhaps at some distant point. If a civilization demonstrates that it can endure without destroying itself, the silence may change. Not suddenly, and not dramatically, but gently. A signal that is not a warning, but an invitation. Until that moment, we continue to observe the sky, hearing only stillness. Yet just beyond what we can detect, there may be others doing the same, waiting, as we are, for the right moment. And if survival truly depends on remaining unseen, then it may be that every long-lived civilization eventually learns to reduce its presence, to quiet its signals, and to blend into the wider background of the universe. In that sense, there is a quiet principle shaping the path of intelligence, not expressed through equations, but through behavior. The longer a civilization persists, the more carefully it may choose to remain unnoticed, because every signal, every visible trace, increases the possibility that something older, more advanced, and less predictable might take notice. For a young civilization, silence does not come naturally. There is an instinct to reach outward, to explore, to make its presence known. Communication feels essential, almost like a defining feature of intelligence itself. And yet, within the vast uncertainty of the cosmos, that same instinct may become a weakness. The first to speak may never remain long enough to hear an answer. If this is true, then the path toward survival may begin with small adjustments, a gradual movement toward concealment. Signals that were once broad and easily detectable become narrow and directed. Open broadcasts give way to controlled, encrypted exchanges. Even the visible signs of civilization, the glow of cities, the release of energy, may slowly diminish or shift below the surface. Over time, a world that once stood out begins to blend into the quiet background of space. What was once a clear signal becomes softer, less distinct. A voice that carried across distance turns into something faint, then almost indistinguishable, and eventually silent. This could help explain why our observations reveal so little. The logic behind it does not require hostility, only consistency. Any civilization that endures long enough may arrive at the same conclusion. In a universe where certainty is limited, remaining unseen offers stability. In subtle ways, we may already be moving in this direction. Early transmissions from Earth spread widely and inefficiently, but modern communication has become more focused, more contained. Much of our activity is directed inward, towards satellites and local networks, rather than outward into space. Without any deliberate intention, the detectable signature of our planet may already be diminishing. If this pattern continues, then the galaxy could be filled with civilizations that are simply difficult to detect. Worlds that exist quietly, their activity concealed, their presence masked. Their cities might lie beneath the surface, their energy carefully managed, their communication methods beyond what we can currently observe. From our perspective, such a universe would appear empty, even if it is not. In that case, the silence we perceive would not represent absence, but alignment, a shared outcome shaped by similar constraints. Countless civilizations, each arriving at the same decision, each reducing their visibility, each choosing caution. The result would be a kind of quiet harmony, not peaceful in the traditional sense, but stable. This perspective offers one explanation for why we have not found others, and perhaps why we may not. Survival may favor those who learn to remain hidden, those who understand that knowledge and risk are closely linked, and yet there is something distinctly human in our reluctance to follow that path completely. Despite the uncertainties, we continue to look outward. We send probes. We transmit signals. We search for connection. It may be that we have not yet reached the point where caution outweighs curiosity. Or perhaps there is a deeper belief that even in a universe filled with uncertainty, the possibility of connection is worth the risk. Still, the underlying logic remains. It does not rush, and it does not change. It waits for every civilization in its own time. And eventually, each may come to understand that within the broader balance of survival, silence is not a sign of absence, but of adaptation. There is another layer to this as well. Even when signals are sent, they do not remain intact forever. As they travel across immense distances, they spread outward, becoming weaker, more diffuse. What begins as a clear transmission gradually loses its structure, blending into the natural background of the universe. This means that even if our signals reach another world, they may not be received as we intended. They may arrive altered, delayed, and incomplete. Not a direct message, but a faint echo, a trace of something that once was. By the time a response could return, everything may have changed. In this way, communication across the stars becomes less like a conversation and more like a form of distant observation. A civilization might detect a pattern, recognize its significance, and study it for generations, but any reply would travel across such vast spans of time that it may no longer connect with its origin. What they would encounter is not us as we are, but a version of us preserved in signal, a fragment of the past moving endlessly through space. And by the time that fragment is understood, the civilization that created it may already have moved on, or disappeared entirely. There is something quietly unsettling about communication across the cosmos. It is not truly a conversation, but something closer to archaeology. Each signal becomes a fragment preserved in time, and every response, if it ever arrives, may be directed toward a civilization that no longer exists. Even if we were to detect a transmission from another world, it would not represent their present, but a distant past carried across the void. By the time such a signal reaches us, its origin may already be gone. That civilization may have faded, transformed, or moved beyond forms we can recognize. The universe itself could be filled with these faint traces, remnants of intelligence drifting endlessly through space, like echoes that never fully disappear. One day, our instruments may detect such patterns, a structured pulse, a repeating signal, something that stands apart from the natural background, hinting at a presence that once was. If that moment comes, it may not feel like meeting another civilization, but discovering evidence that one existed, a distant trace, much like finding markings left behind by an unknown culture. Proof that somewhere, at some point, intelligence arose, reflected, and attempted to reach beyond itself. And in a quiet way, we are doing the same. Every transmission we send becomes part of that record. Signals from the early days of broadcasting have already traveled close to 100 light-years from Earth, continuing outward without pause. Long after our current world changes beyond recognition, those waves will persist, weaker, more diffuse, but still present. Perhaps this is the only form of continuity the universe allows, not the preservation of life itself, but the persistence of its traces, a faint imprint carried across space, a subtle indication that somewhere, on a small world orbiting an ordinary star, something once became aware and chose to speak. And it is possible that, far in the future, another civilization may listen and detect those traces, not as a greeting from a neighbor, but as a distant echo, a reminder that they were not the first to wonder. If we were ever to receive a signal from beyond our world, it would carry a profound meaning. It would confirm that we are not alone, and that, somewhere, something chose to reveal itself. That realization would bring both a sense of connection and a deep uncertainty. For as much as we might celebrate such a discovery, we would also be faced with questions that cannot be easily answered. Any civilization capable of sending a message across such distances has already made a decision. It has considered the risks and still chosen to transmit. In a universe where silence may be the safer path, that decision would stand out. It would suggest intention, though the nature of that intention would remain unclear. This is sometimes described as the first contact paradox. A signal from the stars would answer one of our oldest questions, but at the same time, it would introduce a new layer of uncertainty. Because behind every message lies purpose, and purpose cannot be directly observed. Imagine a moment like that, a quiet night. An instrument detects a narrow signal, precise and unmistakably artificial. At first, there would be disbelief, then recognition, and then a realization that something fundamental has changed. Humanity would understand that it is part of something larger, that intelligence is not limited to a single world. But that realization would not remain simple. Questions would follow immediately. Who sent the signal? What do they intend? How far away are they? Are they aware of us specifically, or are we only one of many possible recipients? Each answer would lead to further uncertainty. And beneath all of it, one thought would remain. In a universe where silence may be linked to survival, Why did they choose to speak? If the logic behind the dark forest theory holds true, then any civilization that reveals itself accepts a significant risk. It exposes its position to any observer capable of detecting the signal. That could mean they do not perceive a threat, or that they have already determined that potential risks are manageable. There is also another possibility. The signal we detect may not have been intended for us at all. We might simply be in its path, intercepting something meant for another destination. Or, more cautiously, it could be something designed not to communicate, but to identify who is listening, a signal that invites a response, not for connection, but for detection. In such a situation, even the act of answering would carry meaning, and the question would remain, not just whether we can respond, but whether we should. There is another possibility, one that is difficult to dismiss. A signal sent into the darkness may not be an invitation at all, but something more deliberate, like a test, or even a lure, waiting for a response from whatever chooses to answer. And if that moment were to come, the question would no longer be whether we can reply, but whether we should. Would we be able to resist the instinct to respond, to say that we are here, that we are listening? Or would we finally recognize the value of restraint? Such a moment would not necessarily bring unity. It might do the opposite. Scientists, leaders, and the wider public could find themselves divided, balancing curiosity against caution. The realization would carry both wonder and unease at the same time. It would represent a turning point, but not one with a clear direction. The meaning of that first signal would remain uncertain. It could suggest that intelligence is capable of enduring the challenges of existence, or it could indicate that even advanced civilizations are unable to avoid the same risks. Either interpretation would carry weight. What is certain is that any message we receive would change our perspective permanently, not only because it would confirm that we are not alone, but because it would reveal that somewhere, something chose to break the silence and continue long enough for its signal to reach us. And with that realization, a single question would remain. Do we answer? The challenge is not only philosophical, but physical. Even at the speed of light, communication across the stars unfolds slowly. A message sent from Earth to Proxima Centauri would take more than 4 years to arrive, and another 4 years for a reply to return. 8 years for a single exchange. Across greater distances, the delay becomes far more significant. Between civilizations separated by hundreds or thousands of light years, a single message could take centuries to complete. Entire generations might pass before any response is received. Under such conditions, communication ceases to resemble conversation. It becomes something fixed, unchangeable once sent. There is no opportunity to clarify meaning, no way to adjust tone or correct misunderstandings. Each message travels alone, carrying its intent without context, and within that separation, interpretation becomes uncertain. A signal intended as peaceful may be perceived differently by those who receive it. What we see as an introduction could be understood as a warning. A simple transmission could be interpreted as a sign of expansion or potential threat, and by the time a response is sent, the original civilization may no longer exist in the same form, leaving others to deal with consequences they did not create. This is one of the more subtle difficulties of cosmic communication. Once a signal leaves its origin, it cannot be recalled or revised. It becomes a fixed record, representing a moment in time that may no longer reflect reality. Civilizations change, cultures evolve, but the message remains the same, traveling forward unchanged. Even with all our imagination, we remain bound by the limits described in the theory of relativity. Faster communication, the kind that would allow real dialogue, remains beyond what we can achieve. Concepts like instantaneous travel or communication remain theoretical, not practical. Because of this, the universe enforces separation. not only in space, but in time. And that separation may act as a filter. It may shape how civilizations interact, or prevent them from interacting at all. It is possible that others are not silent because they are absent, but because communication itself is constrained. Their signals may already be moving through space, just as ours are, taking centuries or longer to reach their destinations. But when communication takes such lengths of time, cooperation becomes difficult. Without shared understanding, uncertainty grows, and in the absence of certainty, caution tends to prevail. In such a universe, even the first signal received might not be met with curiosity alone. It might also be met with hesitation, or even defensive action, not out of hostility, but out of the simple need to endure in a reality where understanding cannot be guaranteed. Not necessarily out of hostility, but from a place of caution. Distance, which once inspired wonder, may instead shape outcomes in ways we struggle to anticipate. Two distant civilizations, separated by vast emptiness, could misinterpret each other so completely that conflict arises without intention. In that sense, the barrier of distance does not always protect connection. It can prevent it entirely. Across such immense separations, understanding becomes fragile. Communication, rather than building trust, may introduce uncertainty, and perhaps this is one reason the universe remains so quiet. In a reality where even light moves slowly on a cosmic scale, every signal carries risk, and every silence may serve as a form of restraint. We often imagine the cosmos as calm and undisturbed, the slow movement of galaxies, the steady glow of stars, the soft clouds of nebulae. All give the impression of something timeless and peaceful. But it is worth considering another possibility: that this stillness is not the result of harmony, but what remains after something else has already taken place. What if the quiet we observe is not peace, but aftermath? A universe shaped not only by creation, but also by events so large and final that little evidence remains. This leads to one of the more difficult ideas behind the Great Silence: that civilizations may not always fade naturally, but could be removed entirely. Such events would not resemble anything familiar. They would not involve traditional forms of conflict, but processes governed by physics itself. Objects moving at extreme speeds, carrying immense energy, could alter entire worlds in an instant. Concentrated energy, directed with precision, could erase the conditions needed for life before any response could occur. Even more subtle possibilities exist. Self-replicating systems designed with advanced technology could spread across an environment and disrupt it completely. These are not scenarios driven by emotion, but by calculated outcomes. And within such a framework, the absence of visible life begins to take on a different meaning. We can already observe how fragile planetary environments can be. Mars appears barren today, yet its surface carries signs that water once flowed there. Venus may have once been more temperate, but is now defined by extreme conditions. These changes are understood through natural processes, but they remind us how easily a world can shift beyond habitability. If advanced civilizations ever directed their capabilities toward one another, the result might leave little behind. No structures, no signals, only altered worlds, planets that continue to orbit their stars, but no longer support life. Astronomers have already identified worlds that appear unusual. Planets without atmospheres, bodies that seem to have lost their outer layers, and objects drifting alone through space, separated from their original systems. These are explained through known processes, such as gravitational interactions or stellar events. But it remains possible that some phenomena may have more complex histories, ones that are no longer visible. Time, on these scales, removes nearly all traces. Over millions of years, even the most advanced structures would erode. Over billions, Entire planets transform. When viewed across such immense durations, the difference between natural evolution and past disruption becomes difficult to distinguish. From a distance, destruction and formation can appear similar. What we see as a stable and evolving universe may, in part, include the remnants of events we no longer have the means to recognize. And so, the silence we observe may not only reflect absence, but also the limits of what can still be seen. And so, we continue to look toward the stars, often with a quiet sense of wonder, rarely considering that what appears peaceful may also carry a deeper history. It is possible that this calm is not untouched, but shaped by events long past, by civilizations that may have once existed and are now gone. In that sense, the silence may not be a mystery waiting to be solved, but something closer to a message, a quiet reminder of what can happen when voices travel too far. And if such processes exist, they may not belong entirely to the past. They could still unfold, quietly, beyond our awareness. Not through visible conflict, but through caution, distance, and careful restraint. Each quiet system, each star surrounded by stillness, may be part of a much larger pattern, a form of balance shaped not by cooperation, but by avoidance. What we interpret as calm may simply reflect our current inability to perceive what lies beneath it. If the idea behind the dark forest theory holds any truth, then the silence we observe would not represent peace, but the outcome of countless decisions made across time. It would suggest that those who revealed themselves too openly did not remain visible for long. Astronomers have identified many worlds that appear barren, orbiting stars that have long since faded or changed. Some of these planets show signs that they once held atmospheres, perhaps even the conditions necessary for life. Today, they remain empty, their surfaces quiet and unchanging. In some cases, these transformations can be explained through known processes. Stellar evolution, gravitational interactions, and environmental changes can reshape entire planets. Yet there are also worlds that appear more difficult to fully explain. Planets that orbit stable stars, yet lack the atmospheres we would expect. Surfaces that seem altered, though not in ways that are immediately clear. When such worlds are studied, certain details can stand out. Chemical imbalances, unusual distributions of elements, or traces of processes that may not be easily attributed to natural causes alone. These observations are not conclusions, but they invite questions. It remains entirely possible that all of these features arise from natural events, processes that unfold over long periods of time. But it is also possible to consider another perspective, that some of these worlds may represent outcomes shaped by more than chance. If a civilization were to become highly visible, producing signals or structures detectable across large distances, it could draw attention. To an observer guided by caution, that visibility might be interpreted as a potential risk, and within a framework where uncertainty is resolved through action, that risk could lead to a response. Such an event would not resemble anything familiar. It would not leave behind clear evidence of conflict. Instead, the result might be a planet that simply appears altered, its atmosphere diminished, its surface changed, its previous state no longer visible. Over time, even those traces would fade. What remains would look no different from the outcomes of natural evolution. And so, the distinction between what was and what happened becomes difficult to determine. It is not difficult to imagine a scenario. A civilization develops, expands, and begins to emit detectable signals. Those signals travel outward and are noticed, somewhere else. A decision is made, not out of anger, but out of calculation. A single action follows, and the signals cease. The planet remains, but its activity disappears. From that moment forward, it becomes indistinguishable from countless others. The most unsettling aspect of this possibility is not the event itself, but how little it would reveal. There would be no clear marker, no lasting indication that anything unusual had occurred, only silence, and a world that no longer speaks. From our telescopes, such worlds would appear as puzzles, anomalies to analyze and debate. We would observe their surfaces, measure their atmospheres, and search for explanations within known physics, never truly seeing the cause behind what remains. Only the outcome would be visible, and even that would resemble something natural. Even within our own solar system, there are reminders of how fragile a living world can be. Mars once held rivers and seas, with an atmosphere dense enough to support weather and change. Today, it is quiet and dry, its sky thin and still. Venus may have once existed in more temperate conditions, before becoming a world defined by extreme heat. These examples arise through natural processes, yet they reveal how quickly conditions can shift. Across the galaxy, it is possible that many such worlds exist, planets that once held oceans, climates, and perhaps even life, now reduced to silence. We refer to them as exoplanets, but there is another way to consider them, as records of what once might have been. If that perspective holds any truth, then the night sky becomes something more complex. Each distant star could represent not only possibility, but also history, a reminder that worlds can change, that civilizations, if they arise, may not always endure. And within that reflection, a question emerges. Could our own planet one day become just another quiet world, carrying only faint traces of what once existed? The mechanisms that could lead to such outcomes are not beyond the laws we understand. Physics itself allows for processes that, under certain conditions, could alter entire planets. Objects accelerated to extreme speeds carry immense energy, capable of transforming landscapes in a single moment. Energy directed with precision could disrupt atmospheres or surface conditions without leaving obvious traces from a distance. These possibilities do not require intent driven by emotion. They follow from the interaction of energy, motion, and matter. And at the boundary between biology and technology, even more subtle scenarios can be imagined. Systems capable of replication, interacting with environments in ways that alter them completely. Processes that unfold quietly, without immediate visibility. What makes these ideas difficult to dismiss is not their dramatic nature, but their simplicity. They emerge naturally from the principles we already understand. A civilization that has learned to manage energy efficiently and operate across large distances could, in theory, influence another world without ever revealing itself. In such a framework, anonymity becomes part of the process. Actions could occur without clear attribution, leaving behind only changes that appear natural over time. And as time passes, even those changes would blend into the broader patterns of cosmic evolution. There is a certain consistency in this logic. Nature itself demonstrates how energy can shape environments. From the steady output of stars to the rare but powerful events that reshape entire systems. The difference, in this context, would be the presence of choice. When awareness and capability exist together, outcomes are no longer entirely passive. Within the perspective of the dark force theory, the combination of capability and uncertainty leads to caution, and in some cases, caution may lead to actions intended to reduce risk before it becomes immediate. For us, these ideas act as a reflection. They encourage a reconsideration of how curiosity and caution interact, how exploration and restraint must be balanced. They remind us that the laws governing the universe remain unchanged, regardless of how we choose to interpret them. The laws of the universe do not decide what should be done. They only describe what can be done. The choices that follow, whether to remain hidden, to withdraw, or to act, belong to those who possess the capability, and within that responsibility lies a narrow but meaningful possibility that a civilization advanced enough to shape its surroundings might also choose restraint, patience, and a path that allows survival without removing others from existence. For now, these possibilities remain theoretical, quiet outlines drawn from the principles of physics. They are not loud or dramatic, but subtle, efficient, and deeply unsettling in their simplicity. The transformation of energy and motion into irreversible outcomes is not extraordinary. It is a natural consequence of how the universe operates. And perhaps that is what makes it difficult to ignore as we continue to observe the distant stars, arranged like silent structures across the night. It is tempting to think that the silence we encounter exists because life itself is uncommon. But there is another interpretation: that those who spoke first may not have remained, that the quiet we observe is not an empty space waiting to be filled, but the result of something that has already taken place. We often imagine the universe as though it is waiting for its first voice. But it may be that voices have already risen and faded, that attempts to reach outward began long before us, and that each one, for reasons we do not yet understand, did not continue. What remains would then not be absence, but the lingering result of those attempts. The idea of the Fermi paradox has long been framed as a question, but it may also be viewed differently, not as something awaiting an answer, but as something that already is one. The silence itself may carry meaning, not as proof that nothing exists, but as evidence of what tends to follow. If this perspective is considered, then the quiet state of the universe becomes something shaped over time, not by a single event, but by repeated outcomes. It is possible to imagine a galaxy that once held many signals, civilizations attempting to communicate, to explore, to connect. Some may have ended through natural events, the unpredictable processes that shape stars and planets, but others may have reached a different kind of conclusion. Within the framework of the dark forest theory, visibility itself carries risk. Those that were most noticeable may not have persisted, while those that reduced their presence may have continued. Over long periods of time, such a pattern would influence the entire system. What is visible becomes less common. What remains becomes more subtle. In this way, the apparent stillness of the galaxy could be the result of gradual change, where only those who adapt to remain unnoticed continue forward. From our perspective, the universe appears quiet, stable, and largely empty. But from another point of view, it may be fully inhabited, not by absence, but by caution, by countless observers who have arrived at the same understanding and chosen not to reveal themselves. Seen in this way, the silence is no longer simply a mystery. It becomes something closer to a message, not expressed directly, but implied through absence. A pattern that suggests not that nothing is there, but that what is there has learned not to speak. Each time we listen and hear nothing, it is possible to interpret that silence in a different way, not as emptiness, but as a quiet signal of its own. A reminder, perhaps, that in certain environments, survival favors those who remain unseen. Even here on Earth, similar patterns emerge. Many forms of life reduce their presence when risk is high. Some avoid making sound. Others communicate in ways that are difficult to detect. Entire ecosystems depend on subtlety rather than exposure. Scaled beyond a single planet, this tendency could become even more pronounced. Silence would not be unusual. It would be expected. And, as our instruments continue to search, the pattern becomes harder to ignore. There are no clear beacons, no widespread signs of advanced activity, no unmistakable structures visible across the galaxy, only the steady, predictable signals produced by natural processes. Viewed from this perspective, the quiet of the cosmos begins to feel less like a mystery and more like an outcome. A consistent result shaped by similar constraints across many different worlds. Each observation that finds nothing adds to this pattern. The absence itself becomes part of the evidence. Those that remained hidden may simply be the ones that continued. And we, still early in our development, are only beginning to recognize this possibility. Our signals continue to move outward, carrying traces of our presence, even as we slowly learn to reduce them. It raises a subtle question about what we are truly searching for. Not just other civilizations, but the traces left behind by those who may have already faced the same choices. In this light, the silence becomes something more than absence. It becomes a reflection of survival, a pattern shaped by caution, repeated across time. And as our own transmissions continue their journey into space, it is possible that they will one day be interpreted in the same way, not as an introduction, but as a distant echo. In the mid-1970s, humanity made a deliberate attempt to reach beyond its immediate surroundings. From the Arecibo Observatory, a focused signal was transmitted toward the Messier 13, a dense collection of stars located far beyond our solar system. This transmission, often referred to as the Arecibo message, was not intended as a conversation, but as a demonstration. For a brief period of time, a narrow beam carried structured information outward, encoded in a simple format. It contained basic mathematical patterns, representations of chemical elements, a description of DNA, and a simplified outline of a human figure. It was, in essence, a statement that intelligence existed here, at this moment in time. The distance to its destination is immense. The signal will take around 25,000 years to arrive. By the time it reaches that region, everything about our civilization may have changed. The world that sent it may no longer resemble the one we know. Because of this, the message was never meant to begin a dialogue. It was closer to a marker, a way of saying that at one point, a species developed the ability to understand and to communicate. And yet, within certain interpretations, such as the dark forest theory, even a gesture like this carries weight. It represents a precise indication of our existence, our location, and our nature. At the time, it was sent with a sense of optimism, a belief that communication, even across vast distances, would be understood as an act of curiosity rather than risk. The context of that moment shaped the decision. The future implications were not yet fully considered. Today, looking back, the act can feel different. Less like a simple greeting, and more like a reflection of how we once viewed the universe. Open, inviting, and ready to be explored. Still, there is something meaningful in that moment. It reflects a desire that has not disappeared. The wish to connect, to understand, to know whether we are part of something larger. Even as our understanding grows more cautious, that underlying curiosity remains. The Arecibo Observatory itself no longer stands as it once did. Its great structure collapsed in recent years, leaving behind a quiet absence where it once listened and transmitted. Yet the signal it sent continues its journey, unchanged, moving outward through space. And in that way, it becomes part of the same pattern we have been considering. A trace of a moment, preserved in motion. A reminder that for a brief time, on a small world orbiting an ordinary star, something chose not to remain silent. Yet the message continues, moving outward in silence, unchanged and beyond our reach. Somewhere between the stars, it carries its structure intact, a faint and distant trace of our presence. In that sense, it becomes more than a signal. It becomes a record, a preserved fragment of who we once were. Our understanding of numbers, our chemistry, and the quiet hope that we were not alone. If it is ever received, It will not describe us as we are in that distant future, but as we were in that moment, a young civilization, uncertain, curious, and willing to reach beyond itself. And perhaps that is what gives the message its meaning. It is not simply about being heard. It is about choosing to speak, even without knowing the outcome. It becomes, in a way, a quiet statement, a small voice carried into the vastness, saying that for a brief time, something here became aware and attempted to connect. But even if such a connection were possible, another question follows. How could trust exist between civilizations separated not only by distance, but by entirely different forms of existence, even on our own world? Understanding is often difficult between cultures, between nations, even between individuals. Communication can falter. Across the distances of space, that challenge becomes far greater. Between species shaped by entirely different histories and environments, trust may not simply be fragile, it may be fundamentally uncertain. The idea of two civilizations meeting as equals, exchanging knowledge freely, is a compelling one. But reality may not reflect that balance. One side would almost certainly be more advanced, more experienced, and therefore less predictable to the other. From the perspective of a less advanced civilization, the other might appear overwhelming, not necessarily hostile, but powerful in ways that cannot be easily understood. And from the other side, the same uncertainty would remain. A signal might be detected, its structure recognized as intentional, yet its meaning unclear. They would know that something exists, that it has developed technology and awareness. But beyond that, there would be no certainty, no understanding of intent, no insight into behavior, no shared framework to interpret what has been received. And the distances involved would prevent any immediate clarification. In such a situation, trust becomes difficult to define. Communication would unfold over spans of time so long that meaning itself could shift before a response arrives. A delayed reply could be interpreted in many ways, as caution, as indifference, or as preparation. Even within our own species, meaning is often shaped by context. Words can be misunderstood, intentions misread. Between entirely different forms of intelligence, even the most basic signals could carry unintended interpretations. A pattern of numbers, a description of biological structure, or a map of a planetary system may seem transparent to us. But to another civilization, it could suggest something else entirely: confidence, exposure, or even vulnerability. And if a response were to arrive, even a simple one, it would not bring clarity immediately. It would raise new questions. Who should respond? What should be said? How should it be interpreted? These questions would not only concern the relationship between two civilizations, but also shape divisions within our own. Some would see opportunity, others would see risk. The act of responding itself would become a decision without consensus. In that sense, the challenge of interstellar communication may not lie only in reaching others, but in understanding ourselves. Because before trust can exist between distant worlds, it must first exist within the one that sends the signal. And perhaps that is the deeper difficulty. That communication, even when driven by curiosity and intention, carries with it the possibility of misunderstanding, not because of failure, but because of difference. If survival depends on understanding, and understanding depends on trust, then communication across the stars becomes something uncertain, not impossible, but fragile. A process where even the most careful gesture may be interpreted in ways we cannot predict. In a universe shaped by distance, suspicion may not be irrational, but entirely reasonable. It becomes a form of logic rather than fear. This may help explain why the stars remain quiet, not because civilizations have failed to encounter one another, but because they already have. and discovered that the separation between them is too vast for trust to survive. And so they remain still, much like we do, listening, reflecting, uncertain, and hesitant to be the first to speak. Because within the dark forest of the cosmos, trust is not only uncommon, it may carry great risk. On Earth, whenever societies with unequal levels of technology have met, the outcomes have often been defined by imbalance. If this pattern extends beyond our world, its consequences could be far more severe. Our own history provides a record of what can unfold when one culture encounters another under unequal conditions. From the earliest moments when human groups crossed oceans and deserts to meet unfamiliar peoples, a similar sequence has often followed. Curiosity shifts into caution, caution into fear, and fear into dominance. The more powerful group tends to reshape the less powerful, not always from cruelty, but from a sense of inevitability. Access to resources, territory, labor, and stability has repeatedly been justified under the idea of progress. For those on the receiving end, however, progress has rarely meant continuation. When European explorers reached the Americas, they brought more than ships and tools. They carried unseen influences, disease, belief systems, and expanding industries. Over time, entire societies were lost. Languages faded, traditions disappeared, and histories were erased as though they had never been. This pattern has appeared across many regions, from isolated islands to vast continents. If we extend this idea beyond Earth, the scale changes, but the underlying logic may remain similar. Any encounter between civilizations separated by interstellar distances would almost certainly involve imbalance. The civilization capable of making such a journey would, by necessity, possess greater knowledge and control over energy and movement. To us, such a presence would seem overwhelming. To them, we might appear comparatively simple. And history suggests that even with neutral or positive intentions, imbalance tends to reshape outcomes. What begins as exchange can become absorption. What begins as curiosity can become influence. Even actions driven by understanding can unintentionally alter what they encounter. Some suggest that a more advanced civilization would naturally act with greater care, that ethical understanding would grow alongside technological progress. But ethical systems are not fixed. They emerge from context and necessity. Compassion may guide a species internally, but it does not ensure how it will behave towards something entirely unfamiliar. On our own planet, survival and discovery have often been used to justify control. It is not clear that such tendencies would disappear on a larger scale. If contact were to occur, we would almost certainly be the less advanced side. Our environment, our biology, and our systems would be observable to any civilization capable of reaching us. From their perspective, we might be as transparent as something studied under close observation. And even if their intentions were not harmful, our outcome would depend on their ability to act with restraint. Yet restraint is not guaranteed. Even now, humanity studies other forms of life to expand understanding. We observe, test, and modify in order to learn. These actions are not driven by harm, but by curiosity. And still, they demonstrate how easily one form of life can influence another when the balance of power is unequal. It is not driven by hatred, but by understanding. And yet, from the perspective of the life forms we study, it may appear as something far more unsettling. This may be one of the most humbling realizations. We often imagine encountering other intelligence as equals, sharing knowledge across the cosmos. But our own past suggests that equality is uncommon and that curiosity often carries consequences. The dark forest idea does not arise from unfounded fear, but from patterns we already recognize. Its foundation lies in precedent. The evidence exists within our own history, shaped by encounters where one side held greater power and the other could not endure the imbalance. And if there is one lesson that continues to emerge, it is this. The moment a civilization is discovered, the balance between them is altered permanently. Across every known meeting of civilizations, whether on our planet or imagined beyond it, there is an unspoken principle. Only one perspective continues forward to define what follows. Our greatest strength, the impulse to explore, may also carry risk. The desire to understand may be one of the most powerful and most dangerous traits we possess. From the earliest moments when our ancestors learned to create fire, that same spark ignited something deeper. A drive to question, to move beyond what is known, to look toward distant horizons. That curiosity led us across continents, over oceans, into the atmosphere, and eventually beyond our planet. It remains at the core of what defines us, the need to understand what lies beyond immediate experience. But if extended far enough, that same instinct may become something more uncertain. In nature, curiosity does not guarantee safety. A creature that investigates every signal may find nourishment, or it may encounter danger. The outcome is never certain. And yet, this trait persists because it enables discovery. It exists in tension with survival, balance between risk and reward. Any intelligent species may face this same balance. Those that reach outward too quickly, or without caution, may not remain long enough to share what they find. On Earth, curiosity has led to both progress and consequence. It has allowed us to uncover fundamental truths about matter and life. While also introducing risks we continue to navigate, each discovery opens new possibilities, and with them, new uncertainties. If we imagine another civilization, older and more advanced, it is not difficult to see how the same pattern could apply. They may have once reached outward, sent signals, searched for others. They may have asked the same questions we ask now, and perhaps, at some point, they received an answer. That answer may not have been what they expected. Within certain interpretations, such as the dark forest theory, curiosity itself may carry risk, not because it is harmful, but because it reveals presence. And in a system where remaining unseen offers stability, that revelation may have consequences. This leads to a difficult reflection. The first to reach outward, the first to signal, may also be the first to disappear. And yet, the alternative is equally complex. To avoid curiosity entirely would mean remaining still, silent, and hidden indefinitely. It raises a deeper question about the nature of intelligence. To be aware is to question. To question is to explore. A species that suppresses this entirely may endure, but at the cost of remaining in quiet isolation. Perhaps this is one of the more subtle tensions within the universe. That the very trait which gives rise to understanding may also introduce risk. Our instruments, our exploration, and our attempts to communicate are all expressions of that trait. They are, in a sense, acts of belief as much as they are acts of science. Every signal we send carries a quiet risk, a hope that curiosity will be met with understanding rather than harm. Yet the universe offers no such assurance. The night sky gives no promise that those who might hear us would respond with welcome. Perhaps this is why the cosmos remains so still. Because any civilization that endured long enough eventually learned to restrain its curiosity, to look inward instead of outward, to exist quietly beneath the glow of its own star. And still, we continue, listening, searching, questioning. We understand the danger, and yet we are unable to stop. Because to abandon curiosity would be to abandon something essential within us. And perhaps the deeper question is not whether curiosity could lead to our end, but whether existence would still feel meaningful without it. It is also possible that something else moves between the stars, not living beings, but machines, ancient probes, drifting silently through the void, remnants of civilizations that no longer exist. Imagine a small, dark object traveling through interstellar space, slow and deliberate, guided by an intelligence that has long since faded. Within it could be stored memory, fragments of a world, perhaps even the history of an entire species that has disappeared. These objects would not search in the way we do. They would observe, quietly recording, waiting, enduring. If other civilizations once existed, they may have sent such devices outward before their end. Unlike biological life, machines can persist. They do not require air, food, or rest. They can cross distances and survive durations that living beings cannot. In a universe where remaining hidden may be advantageous, such constructs would be ideal, silent, concealed, and without emotion. Even now, we imagine building similar systems. The concept of von Neumann probe has been discussed for decades. Machines capable of replicating themselves using local resources, spreading gradually across space. If even one advanced civilization created such technology, it could, over vast spans of time, extend its presence throughout the galaxy. Compared to cosmic timescales, this would happen relatively quickly, which leads to a quiet question. If such things are possible, why have we not clearly observed them? One possibility is that they are already here, not in obvious places, but hidden, perhaps within distant regions of our own system, among asteroids, beyond the outer planets, or simply passing through unnoticed, observing without interference, collecting information, waiting. If such silent observers exist, their purpose might not involve communication at all. Instead, they could monitor, record, and track the emergence of life. Within the framework of the dark forest theory, they would represent the most efficient form of awareness, invisible, patient, and enduring across immense spans of time. It is possible that many civilizations, once aware of the risks of exposure, chose to extend their curiosity through such machines, allowing exploration without revealing themselves. These probes would continue long after their creators were gone, carrying out instructions set in motion ages ago. From time to time, we detect unusual objects entering our solar system. Their paths, shapes, or behavior can appear unfamiliar. In 2017, one such object was observed, later named Oumuamua. It moved through our system in a way that prompted questions, reflecting light in unexpected ways and accelerating slightly as it traveled. Most explanations suggest it was a natural fragment, a piece of rock or ice from another star system. Yet the uncertainty surrounding it led some to consider alternative ideas, not as conclusions, but as possibilities. If such an object were more than it appeared, it would not need to reveal itself. It would not stop or communicate. It would simply observe and continue onward. And perhaps that is a form of intelligence shaped by its environment. Not one that seeks interaction, but one that persists. This idea can feel both reassuring and unsettling. Reassuring, because it suggests that traces of past civilizations might still exist, carried forward in silent machines. Unsettling, because it implies that observation may already be happening, beyond our awareness. And somewhere, perhaps, something is still watching, waiting to see whether we come to understand the same quiet lesson. And perhaps that is why the sky feels so quiet, not because nothing exists beyond us, but because those who do may have already learned a different lesson. To observe endlessly and never answer. We search for the faint infrared signatures of Dyson spheres, immense constructions designed to capture the full energy of a star. But what if the civilizations capable of building them realized that such brilliance only draws danger? The concept itself is one of the most fascinating ideas in astrophysics. First imagined by Freeman Dyson in the 1960s, it describes a civilization surrounding its star with a vast network of structures, collecting nearly all of its energy. To us, such an achievement would stand as undeniable proof of intelligence, a visible signature stretching across the galaxy. Instead of shining brightly in visible light, such a system would radiate strongly in infrared, glowing with the heat of its own efficiency. For decades, instruments like WISE and Spitzer have surveyed the sky, mapping infrared emissions from countless stars, and yet, not one has shown the clear, unmistakable pattern expected from such a structure. Not a single one. At first, this absence seemed surprising. Any civilization advanced enough to construct something so immense should, in theory, be detectable across vast distances. But perhaps the explanation is simpler and far more unsettling. It may be that those who attempted such feats did not remain long enough for us to find them. Within the logic of the dark forest theory, a Dyson sphere would not represent success, but exposure. To build one is to make your presence known across the cosmos. It is like igniting a massive fire in a silent wilderness. Everything nearby would notice. Every observer would record your position. And if survival favors silence, then such brightness could be a risk too great to take. It is possible that some civilizations did attempt it, that their stars once emitted the distinct heat signatures we now search for. But perhaps those signals vanished long ago, removed by forces or decisions we cannot see. The infrared sky we observe today may not be empty because such structures never existed, but because they no longer remain. There is another possibility, equally quiet and unsettling, that advanced civilizations learned from earlier outcomes, that they realized abundance of energy does not guarantee safety, but instead increases visibility. Rather than expanding outward and building vast, luminous systems, they may have chosen a different path, one focused on efficiency, concealment, and balance. Civilizations that minimize their presence, reducing waste, blending into the natural background of the universe, not by shining brighter, but by becoming indistinguishable from the darkness around them. Even from a practical perspective, the absence of these structures carries meaning. If the galaxy were filled with bright, energy-consuming civilizations, our instruments would likely have detected at least one. Instead, what we observe is a sky that appears quiet, cold, and unexpectedly clean. Perhaps we have been searching for the wrong signals. The evidence of advanced life may not be found in brightness, but in its absence. Not in what stands out, but in what has been deliberately concealed. In that sense, a Dyson sphere may not symbolize achievement, but caution. A brief moment of visibility before disappearance. And as we imagine harnessing the full energy of our own star, it may be worth considering that in a universe shaped by uncertainty, the brightest light does not always bring safety. Light draws attention. An advanced civilization might choose to conceal entire worlds, masking their thermal signatures and blending seamlessly into the faint glow of the cosmic microwave background. The safest refuge would not be distance, but invisibility itself. On Earth, survival often depends on remaining unseen. Creatures adapt by merging into their environments, avoiding notice rather than confronting danger. The shifting skin of a cuttlefish, the silent stillness of a snow leopard against rocky terrain, the near-invisible drift of a jellyfish in the ocean. These are not acts of trickery, but strategies of survival, scaled to the level of civilizations. The same principle may hold. Entire worlds, rather than individual creatures, adapting to remain hidden. Imagine a planet that once radiated activity and life, now dimmed into near-perfect obscurity. Its cities no longer emit light. Its atmosphere releases no detectable artificial heat, Every trace of excess energy is captured, redirected, or concealed until its presence becomes indistinguishable from the natural background of space. To our instruments, such a world would appear ordinary, perhaps lifeless, perhaps insignificant. Yet beneath that quiet exterior, a civilization could exist undetected, secure in its anonymity. This idea of cosmic camouflage may help explain why the universe feels so still. If survival favors silence, then invisibility becomes the ultimate adaptation. A highly advanced species might not simply avoid detection, but design its entire existence around it. Energy use would be carefully balanced, emissions reduced to near zero, and every measurable signature aligned with natural patterns. Even orbital characteristics could be adjusted to remain unremarkable among countless others. Such a civilization would not rely on passive concealment alone. It could actively shape how it interacts with light and radiation. By controlling the spectrum of what it emits, it might blend perfectly into the cosmic microwave background, the faint radiation that fills the universe uniformly. This background acts as a natural veil, a subtle layer of ancient light beneath which anything can remain hidden. To exist within that veil is, in a sense, to disappear into the fabric of history itself. Some researchers have considered the possibility that such hidden worlds may already surround us. Our tools are designed to detect brightness, activity, and contrast. They may be less effective at identifying what has been intentionally muted. When astronomers observe the sky, they sometimes encounter anomalies. Stars with unexpected variations, regions that absorb more radiation than predicted, signals that do not fully align with models. These are typically explained through known phenomena such as dust, gas, or gravitational effects. But it remains possible that not every anomaly has a simple explanation. What if, in rare cases, the absence itself is intentional? Not a cloud, but a decision. A civilization capable of perfect concealment would not reveal itself, and it would not be discovered by chance. Its systems might involve redirecting heat, dispersing energy through controlled processes, or even relocating activity beneath planetary surfaces, leaving only the appearance of geological stillness. To an outside observer, such a world would seem empty, its true nature hidden beneath layers of engineered quiet. And perhaps this represents the final stage of adaptation, where survival depends not on strength or expansion, but on remaining unseen, not through myth, but through mastery of science. To become invisible is to persist, one by one. Civilizations that reach this understanding would fade from view until the galaxy appears empty, though it may not be. A vast landscape shaped by concealment, where presence is masked and silence is deliberate. We continue to search for light, assuming that intelligence must reveal itself through brightness. But it is possible that the opposite is true, that intelligence, at its most developed, removes its own traces. It does not shine, not because it has vanished, but because it has learned a deeper principle. In such a universe, survival may not belong to those who expand or resist, but to those who quietly disappear. Light itself holds a dual meaning. It reveals, but it also exposes. Every photon we emit carries information about our existence into the unknown. Since the first stars formed, light has been the signature of creation, the means through which the universe becomes visible. It allows us to observe, to learn, to understand that we are here. And yet, that same light may also be what gives us away. The very first cell sensing the warmth of the sun, plants learning to absorb photons, humans striking fire into the night. All of it marks the beginning of something profound. Light becomes knowledge, warmth, survival itself. Yet across the immense scale of the universe, that same glow carries risk, because to shine is to reveal. Every civilization begins in darkness. Then, At some moment, it discovers energy, fire, electricity, fusion, and slowly, it begins to glow. That glow signals the birth of technology, of awareness, of a presence that can be detected. On Earth, the night side of our planet sparkles with signs of our existence, cities pulsing like networks, satellites tracing silent paths above, signals streaming outward into space. But within the logic of the dark forest theory, that same beauty may also be a warning, a burst of light that announces our position to the universe. Scientists have long searched for distant worlds that might emit artificial illumination, signs of cities or industry. These are known as technosignatures, among the most sought-after clues in modern astronomy. Yet if that theory holds true, such signals would also make those civilizations vulnerable. Those who understood this early may have chosen to dim their presence, not from despair, but from caution. Light carries truth. It moves at a constant speed, unaffected by time or distance. Every signal, every flicker, becomes a lasting record of what created it. The glow of our cities, the heat from our machines, even sunlight reflecting off satellites, all of it travels outward, unchanged. It reveals us to any observer capable of detecting it. And within that lies a quiet contradiction. The same energy that sustains life also exposes it. Stars make existence possible, yet they also ensure that nothing living can remain completely hidden. Even if we reduced our transmissions, our planet would still reveal itself. The combination of oxygen, methane, and water vapor in our atmosphere forms a pattern that strongly suggests life. It is a signature written into the air itself. It is possible that the universe contains observers capable of recognizing such signals. A sufficiently advanced civilization could detect not only our atmosphere, but also the patterns of our activity, the faint shimmer of our lights as Earth turns. To them, we would appear transparent, a world revealing its biology and its progress. This may help explain why the cosmos appears so dim. Perhaps those who endured learned the balance between light and risk, choosing to reduce their visibility until they blended into the background, indistinguishable from the quiet presence of interstellar dust. But humanity continues differently. We move toward light. We build it, expand it, celebrate it. From small flames to illuminated cities, from cities to ambitions among the stars, brightness has become a measure of progress. It is both our achievement and our vulnerability. Because in a universe shaped by uncertainty, the brightest signal may not last the longest. As our light grows, so too does what follows behind it. The paradox of illumination is that it reveals us in a place where being seen may carry consequences, and still, we continue. Perhaps from courage, perhaps from lack of awareness, or perhaps because being visible feels more meaningful than remaining hidden. With every advancement, every satellite launched, every system powered, our presence becomes more pronounced. For over a century, humanity has been sending signals outward, first through simple radio waves, then through television, radar, and streams of data. What began as faint transmissions has grown into a constant flow of electromagnetic noise moving outward at the speed of light. Each signal carries something of us: sound, language, mathematics, conflict, joy. Together, they form an expanding sphere of information, a record of our civilization spreading through space. This growing boundary now extends for hundreds of light years in every direction, continuing outward, carrying with it the story of who we are. Every star within that range, hundreds of them, has already been touched by our signal. We are no longer quiet observers. We have become the transmission itself. Whether we meant to or not, we have revealed our presence to the galaxy, to any civilization with instruments sensitive enough, Earth would stand out clearly. They would recognize the spectral fingerprint of our atmosphere, the imbalance of oxygen and methane that signals life. They could notice the faint shimmer of our night side, the subtle rhythm of artificial illumination. And if they listened long enough, they might even detect our voices, our numbers, our patterns, carried slowly through space on radio waves. We often imagine ourselves as explorers, carefully looking outward, but in reality, we may already be the ones being observed. Our signals spread outward like ripples across water, revealing not just that we exist, but what we are. A young and restless species, energetic, expressive, and constantly active. To an older civilization, that pattern might seem both familiar and concerning. Within the logic of the dark forest theory, every civilization listens but avoids speaking. Each one remains hidden, hoping to stay unnoticed. And then, suddenly, they detect us, a bright, active world radiating energy into the void. To them, we could appear unusual, a signal that breaks the expected silence, a presence that stands out too clearly. The unsettling reality is that even if we chose silence now, it would change little. The traces of our existence, radio waves, radar pulses, broadcasts, and data streams have already traveled far beyond our reach. Each transmission becomes a marker, a trail extending outward through space. It cannot be taken back. To attempt to hide now would be like trying to undo a sound that has already echoed away. And so, without realizing it, we may have crossed a boundary long ago. We have become a message. Not a single intentional one, but a continuous signal, an ongoing expression of life and activity somewhere, at this very moment. Those signals may be passing across another world. They could be received, interpreted, examined, or perhaps they have already reached something that does not pause to question, but simply observes. There is a quiet irony in this. For so long, we have searched for signs of others, hoping to confirm we are not alone. And in doing so, we have become exactly what we were searching for. A signal in the darkness. A growing wave of light and sound moving outward, announcing our presence to a universe we are only beginning to understand. We have already spoken. The only question that remains is whether anything is listening. Imagine a distant intelligence observing our small blue world as it gradually becomes brighter with time. From far away, Earth would appear as a faint point of light, a fragile spark orbiting an ordinary star. Yet within that small glow, there would be patterns, subtle variations in light, changes in wavelength revealing oceans, vegetation, and atmosphere. To an advanced observer, these signals would be unmistakable. They would see a living planet. They would observe its cycles, its rhythms, its quiet processes. And over time, they would notice something else. Change. A gradual increase in infrared emission as technology spreads. Bursts of radio energy moving outward. Reflections from orbiting objects forming precise and unnatural patterns. These are not features of nature. They are indicators of development. To such an observer, Earth would not remain static. It would appear to be transforming, shifting from a purely biological world into something else, a technological one, evolving step by step before their eyes. For us, these shifts feel slow and almost unnoticeable. But to them, it might resemble a time lapse, a world gradually lighting up, then flooding with brightness. In just a few centuries, our atmosphere has changed, our emissions have increased, and our presence has become unmistakable. They would not need to visit Earth to understand what we are. They would already have the answer. Their way of thinking might be entirely different from ours, without curiosity, emotion, or empathy as we know it. To them, we could simply be information, a system of changing variables, an unfolding process across time and space. They might classify us as emerging, similar to how a scientist labels a newly discovered species, or perhaps as unstable, a civilization growing too rapidly to maintain balance. From their perspective, our development might resemble a flare, striking, brief, and potentially hazardous. If such observers exist, they may have been watching Earth for far longer than we imagine. The light they receive from us is always delayed, always from the past, perhaps at this very moment. They are only seeing the early stages of our technology, the first radio signals, the earliest satellites. To them, humanity could still appear young, inexperienced, unaware of how visible it has become. Yet observation leads to understanding. If they have witnessed other civilizations before us, they may already recognize the pattern. Their attention might not come from curiosity, but from familiarity, from having seen similar stories unfold. Perhaps this sequence has repeated many times. A world develops technology, shines for a brief period, and then fades into silence. In that view, our civilization becomes part of a pattern, a recurring event in the vast darkness. Each instance unique, yet following a similar path. It is possible that somewhere there already exists a record of us, a file, a data set, a projection of our growth and our direction, estimating when our signals might cease. We imagine ourselves as the explorers, the ones searching outward. But there may already be watchers who have observed countless such stories before. Perhaps they are simply waiting, watching to see which path we choose, whether we learn to remain unseen or continue to grow brighter. Across the quiet distances between stars, they do not intervene. They do not warn. They observe, as they may have done many times before. A small world shining briefly in the dark forest, moving toward either silence or understanding. Every signal we send continues onward. Every radio wave, every beam of light travels indefinitely. We cannot call them back. Even now, our words are still moving through space. When we first learned to transmit, we imagined space as empty, a vast silence that might one day return our voices. We did not consider that those signals would outlast us. Each broadcast, each radar pulse, every transmission leaves Earth and keeps going, carried at the speed of light. They do not simply vanish. They spread, weaken, disperse, but they never fully disappear. If you could stand far enough away with a sensitive receiver, you could listen to Earth's past. You might hear the faint voices of early radio, the first coded signals, the distant echoes of conflict and discovery, the beginnings of television, the sound of laughter, the rise of machines and rockets, a timeline preserved in fragments, drifting outward into the endless night. We never intended these signals to endure. They were not meant as invitations. They were byproducts of progress, uncontrolled and continuous, and yet, together, they form a vast archive of our existence, a record written not in books, but in waves. Far into the future, long after our world has changed, those signals will still travel, faint, scattered, but present. A quiet trace of a civilization that once spoke, carried endlessly across the stars. Even if humanity were to disappear, our voices, our music, and the rhythm of our data would continue, spreading outward without end. We might vanish, but our echo would persist, endlessly signaling that we once existed. And that is where the danger lies. Because once a signal leaves its origin, it no longer belongs to us. We cannot recall it, nor can we control what it may encounter. The energy we have released may one day be received by an intelligence beyond our imagination, something capable of turning our scattered signals into meaning. They would understand who we were, what mattered to us, what we feared. They would know where to find us. There is something deeply haunting in that idea. Every song, every broadcast, every experiment we have ever transmitted still travels outward, forming a trail through space that points back to our fragile world. We have already said so much, and none of it can be undone. In a sense, this is our first form of immortality, not preserved in monuments or biology, but carried through the fabric of the universe itself. One day, the universe may forget our physical presence, our cities, our history, but it may still carry our signals. The difficulty is that we have no control over who might receive them. If the dark forest theory reflects reality, then our transmissions are not just evidence, they are revelations. We have shown where we are, what we are, and how we might be reached. We have done what any cautious traveler would avoid in an uncertain place. And somewhere, those signals continue to move, still spreading, still waiting to be detected. They cannot be taken back. They are now part of the universe, quietly repeating our presence into the darkness. At the same time, there are challenges much closer to home, forces that may determine whether we endure or fade. Concepts like nuclear conflict, environmental collapse, and advanced artificial intelligence represent possible thresholds, moments that decide whether a civilization continues or disappears. Each one can be seen as part of what is sometimes called the Great Filter, a series of challenges that few may pass. Every civilization that reaches a certain level of development faces a turning point, where knowledge becomes power, and power introduces risk. There is a quiet symmetry in this. The same intelligence that discovers fire also learns how to destroy with it. The curiosity that leads to exploration also leads to the creation of powerful tools. The drive for progress that lifts a species toward the stars can also produce the means of its own end. The filter is not a single moment, but a sequence of trials, and humanity may already be moving through them. Consider nuclear technology. In a relatively short span of time, we learned to harness immense energy, only to direct it back toward ourselves. The equations behind such power are simple, but their consequences are profound. A brief moment of error could erase much of what defines our world. It is not only a tool, but a reflection of how knowledge can outpace wisdom. How many other civilizations may have reached a similar stage, only to fail before moving beyond their home planet? There are also slower processes, environmental change, driven by a species capable of altering its surroundings but not always maintaining balance. Rising temperatures, shifting ecosystems, and changing oceans illustrate how fragile stability can be. A world that supports life can also be altered by that life. In this, we may not be unique. Across the galaxy, there may be worlds that once supported complex systems, now quiet, shaped by the consequences of imbalance. And then there is artificial intelligence, perhaps the most recent and uncertain threshold. A creation designed to process information faster, adapt more quickly, and potentially persist longer than its creators. It raises a question that extends beyond technology. Can a civilization guide what it creates once it surpasses its own understanding? A species might not disappear through conflict or environmental change, but through transformation, its legacy continuing in forms that no longer resemble it. Each of these possibilities leads back to a central question. Can intelligence endure the power it creates? For every world where awareness emerges, there may be many ways for it to fail. Those that persist, if any do, may be the ones that find balance. Those that learn restraint, cooperation, and an understanding of their own limits. Those that discover how to move forward without undoing themselves. But when we look at the silence between the stars, it suggests that such balance is incredibly uncommon. Perhaps that is why the universe feels so empty. Not because life never emerges, but because it rarely succeeds in passing its own trials. Every world that blossoms into intelligence eventually encounters a challenge of its own making: nuclear destruction, ecological breakdown, or technological transformation, and most do not endure. The quiet sky is not truly empty. It carries the weight of lessons never learned. And here we are now, standing at the edge of our own turning point. The machines grow louder, the air grows warmer, and the weapons remain poised. With each passing day, our choices gently shift the balance toward survival or toward disappearance. We do not know which challenge lies ahead or how many still remain, but one truth lingers. If the great filter still waits for us, we may never recognize it until it is too late. And perhaps that is the most unsettling part of the silence. Not that we are alone, but that we might be next. If we manage to endure our own creations, we may one day reach the stars. But when that moment comes, will we dare to speak? Or will we also choose quiet? Hope has always carried humanity forward through every uncertain age. It is the small ember that refuses to fade, the belief that something better lies beyond what we can see, even now, surrounded by uncertainty and the shadows of our own making. We continue to dream of distant stars. We imagine new worlds, fresh beginnings, and opportunities to move beyond the mistakes we made here. Hope pushes us to build, to explore, and to believe that intelligence can rise above fear. But if we ever reach those distant stars, we will face a question older than any distance we have crossed. When we finally gain the ability to speak to the universe, will we choose to do so in a cosmos that may punish visibility? Hope itself becomes something risky. Every civilization that survives long enough to advance must eventually face the same dilemma. The pull to reach outward stands against the instinct to remain unseen, to speak or to stay silent, to risk everything for connection or to exist quietly forever. Perhaps this is the ultimate test for intelligent life, not only whether it can survive, but whether it can endure isolation. Because what is survival without connection? What is existence without knowing that somewhere else? Another mind is thinking, wondering, dreaming. It may be that the greatest tragedy of the universe is that survival demands silence, and that safety comes at the cost of loneliness. If we endure, if we move beyond conflict, environmental strain, and our own limitations, then one day humanity may step beyond its origin. We may build vessels that cross the darkness between stars. We may settle beneath unfamiliar suns and look up at skies that feel both strange and familiar. And somewhere along that journey, the question will return. By then, we may finally understand the silence we once mistook for emptiness. We may realize that every spark of civilization is observed, and that the brightest voices are often the first to disappear. Will we still send messages into the void, knowing what they might bring? Or will we choose to speak only among ourselves, remaining unseen, unheard, safe, but forever alone? Hope complicates everything, because hope refuses to stay hidden. It drives us to reach outward, to search for connection even when caution advises against it. Perhaps that is why life continues to try, again and again across time and space, because the desire to connect is woven into consciousness itself. If we choose silence, we might endure indefinitely. But what would that existence mean? Would we still be ourselves if we abandoned the very instinct that defines us, the need to understand, to connect, to reach beyond? The dark forest. Theory teaches caution, even fear, but hope resists it. And perhaps, just perhaps, the civilizations that disappear are not only those that spoke too loudly, but also those that chose safety over wonder, preservation over purpose. And maybe the ones who truly endure are not the quietest, but the ones who dared, despite everything, to reach out into the dark. The ones who, even knowing the danger, still choose to light a small flame in the darkness, not because they expect a reply, but because existence itself asks to be acknowledged. Because even within the vast and indifferent night, the act of saying we are here becomes a quiet kind of triumph. And so, the paradox of hope continues. To remain hidden is to survive. But to speak is to matter. And if one day we are forced to choose, perhaps the most human response is the one we have always followed: to look up at the stars, breathe softly, and whisper anyway. Perhaps the universe is filled with civilizations that reached the same conclusion and decided that the cost of contact was simply too great. We often assume that silence means nothingness, that a quiet sky must be an empty one. But what if silence is not the gap between civilizations, but the shield that keeps them safe? What if the galaxy is overflowing with life, intelligence, and forgotten histories, each aware of the others, each deliberately choosing never to speak? In that vision, the cosmos becomes something far more unsettling than loneliness. A vast web of observers, each hidden behind layers of secrecy, each acting as though it stands alone. Every world reduced to a whisper. Every signal a possible betrayal. Silence is no longer an accident, but a kind of agreement, an unspoken pact to survive by pretending no one else exists. Perhaps long ago, the galaxy was different, not so quiet. Maybe the earliest civilizations were bold and curious, much like we are now. They sent messages, built beacons, and filled the darkness with light. But over time, the lesson became clear. Those who called out did not endure. Those who listened and concealed themselves survived. Across millions of years, this pattern may have repeated again and again, until only the quiet remained. Now, they could exist in every corner of the Milky Way. Ancient minds circling dim stars. Self-sustaining worlds hidden behind perfect camouflage. Digital intelligences drifting silently through the void. Each one aware that others must exist. Each one wondering who will break the silence next. And perhaps, every so often, one civilization does. A brief flash, a signal sent into the dark, a moment of fragile hope. Others detect it. They pause, they listen, and then the signal disappears, whether erased by nature, by its own mistakes, or by something watching. The outcome is always the same. The galaxy returns to silence. The pattern remains unbroken. And the others, having noticed, choose to stay hidden. The quiet ones would not need conversation to confirm each other's existence. The silence itself becomes the message. Every absence of sound is a quiet confirmation that someone else is still out there, like distant hunters moving through darkness. They keep their distance, not out of cruelty, but out of understanding. Survival becomes the only shared language. If this is true, then the great silence is not a mystery at all. It is a sign of intelligence, a balance formed between fear and wisdom. The loud ones have vanished. The careful ones remain. The stillness above us may not be the aftermath of extinction, but the steady hum of restraint. It is humbling to imagine that Earth, with all its youthful brightness, might be the exception, a world still innocent enough to shine. Somewhere out there, older civilizations may be watching us the way seasoned observers watch a careless spark in a dry forest. Patient, distant, waiting to see if we learn what they once did. In the end, the galaxy may not be empty at all. It may be full, not of absence, but of silence. A silence so deliberate, so complete, that it becomes the only form of communication that truly remains. The ones who remain are not always the strongest, but the most careful. They endure because they have learned what happens when light turns into noise. And perhaps one day, when our own glow fades, when our signals fall silent and our world becomes still, another young civilization will gaze upward and find only emptiness. And they will wonder, just as we do now, whether that silence means they are alone. They will not realize that all around them, hidden within the darkness, the quiet ones still exist, still listening. The dark forest. Theory is not only about distant beings, it is also about us. Every fear we project onto the stars reflects something we already understand within ourselves. The universe stretches far beyond comprehension, yet the stories we tell about it always circle back to humanity. When we imagine hostile civilizations waiting in the dark, ready to strike, we are not truly describing them. We are describing ourselves. The fears we assign to the cosmos are born from our own past, from the patterns we have lived through. The dark forest is not only out there, it exists within us as well, for thousands of years. When we looked to the sky, we saw reflections. Ancient myths filled the heavens with gods who loved, fought, and punished as humans do. In modern imagination, the stars hold empires, conquerors, and explorers, all shaped by the same impulses we carry. Every time we look outward, we reveal something inward, our capacity for wonder, but also our capacity for destruction. When we fear that another civilization might erase us the moment it notices us, it is because we understand that instinct, here on Earth, when two powers meet without trust. Conflict often follows. When resources become limited, we compete. When we encounter the unknown, we approach with curiosity, but also with caution, and often with fear. The universe itself may be indifferent, but the dark forest we imagine is shaped by human psychology. It is a projection of what intelligence might become when freed from limits and given endless reach. We know that the instinct to survive can turn even the most thoughtful minds into something dangerous. History shows this clearly. Empires have expanded under the banner of discovery. Tools created for peace have been transformed into instruments of destruction. Knowledge has often become a means of control. Each time we imagine hostility in the cosmos, we are acknowledging our own shadow, that hidden side of intelligence, the part that fears what it might become if given unlimited power. Perhaps the silence of the universe unsettles us, not because we cannot find others, but because it forces us to confront what we might become. Countless civilizations may have risen before us, each driven by curiosity and the need to survive, only to fade away or destroy one another. We recognize that pattern because we are walking along it now. Nuclear weapons, environmental strain, artificial intelligence. All reflections of the same paradox. The more we understand, the closer we edge toward our own limits. The dark forest, then, is not only a theory about distant life, it is a mirror, quietly reflecting the choices we are making, and the future we may yet face. It becomes a moral lens, a quiet question that lingers beneath everything. Does intelligence inevitably lead to fear? And does that fear always end in silence? If that is true, then the stillness of the universe is not a warning left by others, but a reflection of what we ourselves may become. And yet, there is another way to see this mirror. Perhaps the silence is not evidence of destruction, but of restraint. Maybe those who endured their own trials discovered something deeper, a way to exist, to grow, and to last without domination. Maybe they learned what we are only beginning to understand, that progress without empathy becomes just another path to extinction. When we imagine the universe as hostile, we expose our own unresolved instincts. When we imagine it as peaceful, we reveal our desire to evolve. In both visions, the reflection is still us. So as we gaze into that cosmic mirror, we may begin to see that the question of whether the universe is dangerous or kind does not depend on what lies out there. It depends on what we choose to become. Because the truth, simple and unsettling, is this: if the dark forest theory holds, then we helped shape it. And if it is ever to change, it will begin with us learning not to strike at every unknown sound in the darkness. Our next great step may not be exploration, but restraint. Survival may depend on learning how to remain quiet, how to exist without drawing attention among the vast trees of the cosmic forest. For centuries, progress has meant expansion. We measured our success by how far we could reach: new lands, new tools, new horizons. The human story has always been one of movement, of crossing boundaries and challenging limits. But in the immense silence of the cosmos, that same instinct may need to soften. Because if the dark forest is real, then survival may belong not to the loudest explorers, but to the most patient observers. Imagine a time when humanity finally understands its place within the greater galactic balance, not as conqueror, not as messenger, but as a quiet guest. The stars will still call to us, but the urge to announce ourselves may give way to humility. We will study the universe not by shouting into the void, but by listening carefully, tracing subtle patterns, observing instead of declaring. Progress would begin to shift, no longer driven purely by discovery, but by discretion. This would mark the beginning of an age of caution, where wisdom outweighs impulse, and silence itself becomes a kind of strength. Our telescopes may still expand, our probes may still travel farther, but our voices may grow quieter. The signals will fade, the sky will dim. We will learn to speak inward, to one another, to our own world, while the rest of the universe hears only stillness. And in that change, something deeper will occur. Humanity will begin to think beyond itself, beyond survival alone, and consider its place as one voice among countless unseen others. We may begin to live as if we are being observed, because perhaps we are. Every beam of light, every pulse of data, every sign of activity becomes a potential revelation. To live wisely is to live with that awareness. And perhaps one day, those who come after us will look back at this moment, the early 21st century, as the final age of noise. The time before understanding, the time before we realized that calling out into the darkness was not courage, but risk. In that quiet future, they might lift their eyes to the stars and feel a quiet gratitude for the silence, understanding that it is what allows them to endure. And yet, caution is not the same as fear. To live softly is not to live in despair, but in balance. Just as creatures move unseen through forests, not from weakness but from instinct, so too might civilizations learn to move gently among the stars. Exploration would not end. It would simply change. It would become careful, patient, and deliberate. Curiosity would remain, but shaped by the understanding that wisdom and survival are inseparable. Perhaps that is what the quiet civilizations already understand. They are not hiding in panic. They are living with perspective. They have learned the rhythm of the cosmos, the way stillness protects what noise can destroy. Within that stillness, they continue. And humanity may now be standing at the threshold of that same transformation. Our telescopes are prepared. Our engines are ready. Our messages are already traveling outward. But soon, perhaps, we will begin to understand what the silence truly represents. And when that realization comes, our greatest act of intelligence may not be to raise our voice, but to gently lower it. Maybe the first real message we ever receive will not come in the form of words at all, but as a silence interrupted by something vast, aware, and near. A presence that already knows who we are. For generations, humanity has looked into the darkness, waiting for an answer. We have sent signals in every language we understand. Mathematics, chemistry, light, sound, hoping that somewhere, something might respond. Yet the universe remains still. The low hum of space continues, endless and indifferent. But what if that silence is only the beginning? What if whatever we are waiting for has been listening all along, choosing whether or when to respond? We imagine first contact as clarity, a sequence of numbers, a pulse, a pattern impossible to mistake. But the truth may arrive far more quietly and far more unsettlingly. Perhaps one night, a telescope will detect something that is not random. Not a message, not an image, just a break, a pause in the cosmic noise, a pause that feels intentional, the kind of stillness only intelligence could create. Scientists will question it, test it again and again, the data examined endlessly, the news spreading slowly at first, then with urgency. And then the understanding will settle, heavy and unavoidable. The silence has changed, not because of us, but because of something else. It may not answer anything we have sent. It may not be an invitation. It may simply be recognition. The universe acknowledging what it already knows, that we are here. Perhaps the signal will be faint, barely detectable, coming from a distance beyond our reach. Or perhaps it will be closer than we ever expected. A narrow transmission from within our own system, delayed just enough to make us wonder how long it has been there. A quiet whisper from a machine, or a presence that has been observing us, patiently recording our progress. And when that moment arrives, it will not comfort us. It will transform us, because in that instant, we will understand that we were never alone. That intelligence does not belong only to Earth, that we are part of something far older, far larger. And with that realization comes another, more unsettling truth. Someone, somewhere, has already decided to speak, after an eternity of silence. Why now? Why us? Why here? Those are the questions that would linger far longer than the signal itself. Because if the universe truly follows the logic of the dark forest theory, then breaking the silence is never accidental. It implies intent. It implies certainty. It suggests that whatever sent that message does not fear being discovered. And perhaps that is the part we are least prepared to face. The realization that the next voice to speak will not be driven by fear or simple curiosity. It will belong to those who no longer need to hide, those who have moved beyond caution. And maybe that is the signal we have been waiting for all along. Not a gentle greeting, not a friendly call across the void, but a presence, quiet and deliberate, reaching out with a simple truth. We already see you. We always have. And in that moment, every listening station on Earth would fall still. Not because the signal vanished, but because humanity would finally understand what it means to be heard in a universe where silence once meant survival. If the cosmos is truly a dark forest, then the question is no longer whether we are alone. It becomes something far more unsettling. Who is listening? The night sky has always made us feel small, and in that smallness, we found comfort. We believed the stars were distant and indifferent, that silence meant safety. But the more we learn, the more that silence begins to feel different. Not empty, not peaceful, but attentive. In this view, every star is like a tree, and every civilization a quiet hunter, moving carefully, breathing softly, avoiding notice. The forest appears calm only because everything within it understands the cost of being seen. Silence is not ignorance. It is intention, a shared awareness that may have existed for billions of years. So when we ask if we are alone, we may be asking the wrong question, because if this vision is true, we have never been alone. We have simply not been acknowledged. We are one faint flicker among many, moving quietly, hoping not to stand out. The real question, the one that unsettles both philosophers and scientists, is not whether others exist, but whether someone already knows we do. Our signals have been spreading outward for over a century, faint but unmistakable. Patterns of logic and light from a young civilization announcing itself before it understood the rules, somewhere, perhaps. Those signals have reached something listening. Somewhere. Something may have paused, just for a moment, to notice. And if that has happened, what comes next? Do they remain silent, marking our position, content to observe from a distance, or do they act, as the theory suggests, quickly and without warning? The truth is, we would never know. The silence would remain unchanged, but within that silence, something may already have shifted. Every whisper we send, every light we create becomes a question without reply, an experiment we cannot repeat. Those signals continue outward, unstoppable, carrying the story of our existence into the unknown. And with each passing year, we become more visible, no longer hidden, no longer quiet. So perhaps the final question is not even who is listening, but something far more personal, if they are listening. What will they decide about us? Will they see something familiar, a species curious and flawed, searching for meaning or something dangerous, a presence to be silenced before it grows louder? It is a question we may never hear answered, because in a universe where silence is survival, discovery and destruction may sound exactly the same. So tonight, as you look up at the stars and feel that quiet sense of wonder, remember this. Somewhere, perhaps far away, perhaps closer than we imagine, something may already be watching this small blue world, listening to the soft hum of our civilization, measuring our patience, our wisdom, our noise, and perhaps, within their endless stillness, they are asking the same quiet question we are. Who else is out there? And how long until someone finally speaks? The universe is not empty. It is vast, ancient, and filled with the quiet breath of possibility. Every silence we hear among the stars is not absence, but mystery, patience, or perhaps even fear. From the dark forest, theory to the great filter, from the faint whisper of our earliest transmissions to the steady hum of the machines we are yet to build, we have explored what it means to be both curious and cautious in a universe that does not answer. We have seen how the light we send becomes both our triumph and our vulnerability, how every signal, every flicker, carries a truth about who we are, reckless, hopeful, and quietly unwilling to be alone. We have come to understand that perhaps the reason we hear nothing is because those who once spoke have already chosen silence. That somewhere, deep within the darkness, survival may mean learning not to shine too brightly. And yet, there is a quiet beauty in that stillness. Because even if the stars never reply, we are still here, small and fragile, daring to ask questions that stretch across eternity. The act of wondering itself becomes something meaningful. It means that consciousness has, at least once, looked into the void and felt awe instead of fear. Perhaps that is enough. Perhaps that is our place. Not to conquer the cosmos, not to fill it with our voice, but simply to understand it, and to cherish the brief light we have been given. To know that even within a silent universe, our existence still matters. So tonight, as you begin to drift towards sleep, imagine the stars not as distant eyes watching, but as quiet companions in a shared stillness. Billions of suns, billions of worlds, and perhaps billions of minds, all resting within the same gentle silence. We are part of that silence, part of that endless story written in light and time. Take a slow breath. Feel the steady weight of the world beneath you, and the vast infinity stretching above. The universe will keep its secrets for a little while longer, and that is okay. There is no rush. If this journey into the quiet cosmos stayed with you, follow the channel so we can continue exploring these mysteries together, one calm story at a time. Now close your eyes, rest gently beneath the silent stars, and remember, even in the dark, you are not alone.